Coming up in this episode.
If I wanted to do a startup on, an app for pregnant women to help them with, the 9-month pregnancy journey, it's not a good fit for me unless I was to partner up with a lady who maybe she's had 8 kids and she's like, I always have the same problem, and I know I have an idea about a technical problem, and I would pair up with them to help her solve it if I cared enough about it. Really own the problem. Don't go and solve a problem in an area you have no experience of.
You have to make a lot of mistakes for yourself in order to understand the importance of them, hearing them from other people. It's just like your parents telling you, what you should and shouldn't do in life, right? You're still going to go out there and do the exact fucking thing they told you not to do. You need to learn for yourself. And so, that's part of it.
Mistakes. You got to make your own mistakes. Especially in the early days, like you cannot test everything. It's impossible. You have to go on 90% plus assumptions and go, I think if I do this, then people will like it.
The Founders Unplugged podcast.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well, thanks. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah. You're a bit it sounds like you're in a tunnel a bit. Is that a new headset?
Are we recording? I can you can time this bit out, right?
Technically, we can do. We might leave it in for authenticity. I don't know. We'll see.
So hang on. I don't use Google Meets enough. So should I just blur my background so that people don't?
If you want.
Wondering.
It's up to you.
There's nothing there. That's fine.
Is that like a Peloton or some sort of bike you got in the background there?
It is indeed. Exercise bike. It's not the fancy Peloton one.
No, those are very fancy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the subscription price on that was what put me off, to be honest. I'm just going to change my microphone though. Hang on, so you can probably hear me clearer.
It does sound like it's coming from your microphone on your headset, but
it's new and it shouldn't not do that. It's weird. It's fine with Zoom, but it's not fine with something else.
Right, that sounds better.
Okay, that's using the webcam mic.
Okay, let's see how it goes.
Well, I mean, if you can't hear me, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can hear you. It's all good.
There's my 2 options, this one and that one. So
yeah, well, see, I think this sounds fine. Yeah, let's go. At the end of the day, I can hear you in both. That's the most important thing, right? So that's the main thing. And yeah,
try this one. Is it better now or is it better now? Testing, 1, 2, 3.
That's very echoey.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
That's much better. That's much better.
Okay.
Yeah, that seems to have reduced echo. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, maybe we will cut.
I don't know. Technology is not my forte,
Yeah, often the case with tech founders, right? Anyway, look, it's good to have you on, man, and good to see you again. Yeah, how have things been since we last caught up? What have you been up to?
Trying to enjoy bits of the summer, as and where it's not pissing with rain. Just onwards and upwards of everything, really, I guess.
Good.
Got some new clients, some new opportunities, some custom work, some sorts of fun things. So
good. Well, look, before we get into it, why don't we? This is about the only one piece of structure I have in this entire thing. Why don't you introduce yourself for those listening / watching, and tell us a bit about you and the business.
Sure. So, brief history of me. I was born, raised in London. I went to university up in Leeds, did computer science there, and I graduated first class honours from Leeds University, left there and joined a technical graduate program with Thomson Reuters, which was very interesting. Put me through different areas of the business, including a little stint abroad, 6 months in Tel Aviv. And then I came back to London. I was offered a role as a product manager in New York. So off I went to New York back in 2011. And I became a product manager there. I started working in the news division there, working on different technical products, the API, the live streaming systems and things like that. And kind of worked my way up through product management, senior product manager, so on and so forth, till around 2015, which is when I decided to return to London. Came back to London, was promoted up to Director of Enterprise Video, which I did for a few years, building products like Reuters Insider. It's kind of the Bloomberg TV equivalent, you'd think.
All right.
At Reuters, which is like a financial video news streaming platform, as well as the editorial management system for live video streaming all over the world. So we rebuilt that from the ground up on the cloud, which is perfect timing for COVID. But then, after a few years here in London, I started kind of looking to buy property, actually. You know, saved up loads of money and I could borrow loads more. So I started trying to look around, figure out what things were worth, and was pretty blown away by the kind of the backwards nature that property valuations would take in this country. And so I did what I thought was a sensible thing, which was try and solve the problem myself. Think I could do a better job than this. And so fast forward a few more years, and Landworth is out there now in the market. We have customers. We're a property valuation platform, and there's a property valuation platform, helps to value any property around the country, just like a surveyor would. It's kind of a desktop valuation. You just do it in a couple of minutes for much cheaper than a survey would cost. Obviously, if you get a subscription package, things get even cheaper. But as Greg is exploring our maps, we have heat maps across the country, we have a search tool, we have a valuation tool. And so it really helps to give you kind of an impartial view of the market, like what is stuff actually worth, not what is an estate agent telling me it's worth or what he can sell it for. Yeah, so the majority of our customers now are sort of the professionals, like developers, investors, lenders, people like that, who are valuing properties day in, day out. They need this tool, saves them loads of time, gives them better confidence, gives them more data. And, you know, I think the saying that data is the new oil, kind of quite true in a lot of ways. So the more you know, the more power you can have in a conversation, really. And you know, even to the point now where people are challenging survey evaluations and they are having them overturned or changed based on the data that we're providing them with. So
right. So what's making your data more unique than, say, the data that was traditionally being used? Like, what are you pulling from that makes it as accurate as it is?
Well, so the data sources themselves are similar, you know, synonymous with a lot of what other people are using. I guess the value add that we're doing is a couple main areas. One would be the derivatives of the data. So you know, I'll loosely throw the word AI around so that we have some artificial intelligent algorithms that do some smart stuff with different bits of the data. You know, it's not like a holistic, it's a chat GPT, it's all in one AI, but we use bits of AI in different aspects of the platform. For example, we read floor plans. So there's a simplistic neural network that runs to look at a floor plan, extract out the size from there that we can then use into calculations and things.
That's very smart.
Yeah, so that's one. We have our whole model in general that produces the price per square foot around the country, and that's like a system. We retrain that every month. As new data comes out from the land registry, we feed it into it, and very quickly we update all of our databases and algorithms and things accordingly. So we kind of create this extra level of data that helps users arrive at the final numbers that they're looking for faster. So for example, when we have a list of comparables, we can say, well, these ones are the best comparables. We look at several different data points. We give a grading to each comparable and say, these are the A grade comparables. These ones you're going to want to focus your time and attention on. Don't worry about the C's and the D's because they're just not similar. And that kind of stuff helps. It just saves you more and more time. So that's part of it, I would say, is this derivative data. And the other part is the user interface or the user experience, which, you know, over the last several years, UX has become a bigger and bigger thing. It's a whole industry on its own now. It's really important how you present data and the workflow to the users to make the tools easy to use, nice to use if in some ways. So they actually enjoy the searching they're doing, not just, it just doesn't feel like some big data analysis tool, not a big Excel spreadsheet which scares people off. It's actually there and it's friendly and it's easy to use. So
a bit like what ChatGPT did with the way it sort of enabled people to interface with large language models. It just made it accessible. It made it a pleasure to deal with as opposed to a nuisance. You didn't need a degree in order to operate the bloody thing.
If you can speak a language, you can use ChatGPT. It's absolutely right. It's that's part of the reason for its mass adoption. The user experience matters massively. And Landworth, we have it. A little guide and we do some demos and things like that, but actually a lot of people just pick it up and just start using it and they get the hang of it. Usually, yes, exactly. That's a good user experience. I can say to people, did you ever read the user manual for Facebook or Instagram or TikTok? No, you picked it up and you just got the hang of it really quickly. That's a good user experience where you don't have to pick up documentation. No one likes reading manuals. You know, the helping part comes in later, maybe where I would sit down with someone and show them, there's this button over here and there's actually a button over there and it does this and does that, and you become a kind of a power user, if you will.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's like, you know, moving from intermediate to advanced kind of thing. That's like just a different thing. We're having, funny enough, the same discussion with my startup about our user experience. We're nearing the end of our perhaps our final sprint before kind of our soft launch, I guess you could say, our beta launch. And yeah, a lot of what we're talking about now is like, what can we refine to just make it intuitive, because a lot of stuff we're finding, oh, wait a minute, we need to explain this several times to our developers, which means our users are going to need to explain it to them several times. So like, we need to make it easier. So yeah, it's a very important part of it. But so
focus groups and that kind of stuff on those is really powerful. That's the kind of thing where you sit down with the user and you go, you don't say, okay, this is how you use the product. You say, I want you to achieve this goal. Yeah. I want you to give me a PDF report of this, or tell me this number, and you watch them try and figure out how to do it. That's usually how you find those weak points where they get stuck. You don't shout at them, go, no, you're being stupid. It's right. You're being stupid as the developer or the product manager, because, well, it's not stupid, but you know, I'm being a bit mean. Yeah. You start to build up assumptions because you've designed the thing, so you know how it works. It doesn't mean it's obvious for anyone else.
Exactly.
And,
yeah,
you know,
I've worked with some founders over the years. My God, they've you know, they would bend over backwards in order to create an onboarding process that was to educate them on how to use the product, when it was just like, dude, you've just got to make the product easy to use. Like, we shouldn't have to spend 3 hours with someone to explain how to do something. Like, that's friction. There's a problem. Attack the problem. But they're so married to the idea of the way it's built and they can't let it go. And that's a huge problem. So is that something that you did then? Did you work through focus groups when developing the platform then?
So not officially, I would say, right. more like friends and family focus groups, which is good, because
it serves the same purpose. Yeah, absolutely.
So I have the mother test.
Right. Yeah.
Which, you know, I think I definitely coined it many years ago, and I realized that someone's written a book about the same thing, I think. But
oh, really?
Okay. If my mum can figure out how to use it without me guiding her, then it's probably okay for most people, right? You know, maybe I don't need the grandmother test. That's a little bit too far. Right. But you know, my mum's, she's smart. She's not the most technical savvy of people. I think it took her a good 15 years to figure out how to use the Sky remote. So, which is pretty, you know. So if she can figure out how Landworth works without me prompting her and telling her what to click on, then I'm like, it's pretty close to where it needs to be.
I think I might have to do that with my platform with my mum. My mum's a very passionate French woman, a little French fire rocket, I suppose you could call her. And I've seen her try and battle, like you said, with the Sky remote, things like that, and it gets violent pretty quick. So you know, I think that would be an interesting technique. I might have to steal that from you, do the mother test and see what happens.
By all means,
because if anyone's going to be brutally honest about it, it's going to be my mum.
That's exactly it. Your mum, they won't sugarcoat it too much. I depends on your mother. But if she's a French lady, I don't.
She's like, what is this fucking thing? Why doesn't it fucking work? Right. That's what it should be like, you know, with a very thick French accent, obviously.
The other thing I'd just add as well for anyone that's listening, like, you know, the other thing's really important is analytics. Like, this is not a one and done type thing. This is a constant refinement type thing where you're always got to make it better, always figure it out. Like, you know, like I said, there's a button there. I have to explain to someone that button's there that does something. Well, maybe I need to make that button a bit more prominent. And this sort of stuff, you'll never figure it out. If you keep trying to make the perfect user experience, you'll never launch. You know, there's a quote from it's Reid Hoffman. He says, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, then you've launched too late. You should be embarrassed. You really want to get it out there as soon as possible. Make sure you've got analytics installed in the app. There's a whole suite of different applications you can use for that, from Mixpanel to Heap to Full Story. Google even doing some upgrades and stuff now. Get it out. Look at what people are doing, look at pain points, look at rage clicks and things like this. And that can help you to then further refine the user experience. But just don't expect that it'll be able to be perfect. It's a quest for perfection. Good
advice. Very good advice. I think that's often the thing that people misinterpret about when people say, you know, working fast in startups, meaning, you know, skip over on like implementation of these analytics side of things. You can't power through that and do that wrong. You've got to do that right. You've got to take the time to do that right. But in terms of actually delivery to market, accepting that things aren't going to be perfect, those are the kind of things you can act quick on. It's about, in fact, I had the same conversation with a pro bono session with someone recently when they were kind of like, there was a bit of confusion over this idea of going fast or going slow. It's like, well, it's a contradiction. People are telling me to go fast in one area, but also don't skimp the details on this area. It's like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, well, that's a hard thing to explain, but essentially what it means is when it comes to the fundamental nuts and bolts operationally for your business, you can't speed past that. Some things have to be very, very solid. But when it comes to delivering something in order to get feedback, the quicker you get that feedback, the better, right? And I suppose that's the way I kind of frame it in my mind. But just to go back to something you said right at the beginning, this was born. The idea of the concept of Landworth was born out of your experience in trying to purchase. Was it land or a property? It
was property at the time, actually.
Property. Did you manage to find your property in the end?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So it's not like this whole time that you were just like you're still building this in the hope that one day you could use it to find your property. It's like you did muddle through the options out there to find it. Then in the end.
Yeah, exactly. I did not get stuck in analysis paralysis for too long. I did a little bit, I will say, because there was a bit of like figuring things out. But I mean, just to dig a little bit more into the Landworth kind of nuts and bolts, like the core algorithm there, our AI sort of intelligence there, if you will, what it's really doing is looking at land values. I basically use the example that when people say my property's doubled in value, right? I bought my property 10 years ago, it's doubled in value. How great's that, right? The property doesn't change in value itself. It's the land that the property's built on that will be changing in value. Maybe you've refurbed the property, but if you haven't changed it at all, then the bricks and mortar, if anything, is depreciated, right? The land that it's built on has become more desirable because people have moved in the area and paid more, and new builds have gone up, and new Waitrose or a new train station or a new school or a new park. These bring up the value of land, and if your property's there, it will go up in value accordingly, and capital value increases. And so we realized this early on that really it's those land values. And so our algorithm actually tracks price per square foot around the country, and we use that as a proxy to determine what the price of a property would be depending on what's built there, how big is what's built there, and so on and so forth. That's one of the ways that we will value property. And so there's this core kind of Landworth algorithm that determines price per square foot, like the averages and the ranges in any given area. So when I was buying my property here, I was basically making offers. Obviously, there's the whole negotiation process. I was making offers based around price per square foot. And they're like, why is he offering us these bizarre numbers? Like, it wasn't wrapped to the nearest 10,000, 5,000. It was the nearest few hundred and stuff. And I get some odd looks, and I explained to them why, because I said, I know what this should be worth. And in the end, I won't give the details, but I took a nice hefty chunk of discount off the price because I had the data to, support. It wasn't me just plucking, I'm just going to take 50,000 off, and off of that, I was actually doing it based on data, and it was much. So
you weren't making friends of estate agents at the time, is what you were telling me, but maybe more so now that you're facilitating.
Yeah, it's a bit of a dog eat dog world buying and selling properties, I would say that, but
but that's interesting. So I mean, that would then, to me, insinuate that isn't really an approach that's being taken when valuating properties in the current market, that they're not really, like you said, that's an incredibly important factor when valuating a property. But is it the case that that's not really something that they're using that well, or is it just because there hasn't been a Landworth before where they've been able to effectively analyze that data and come up with those valuations more accurately? Or is it a mixture of both?
Depends who you're talking to, I think.
Right.
Ultimately, it's with the estate agent. They'd like to know what a property is really worth, like a fair market value for the property, but they're always going to try and get more than that because that's their job is to represent the seller. So it is, estate agents aren't our best clients. I will say that. We have some on board, but they're not our best customers because they're not spending their own money. Ultimately, someone who's spending their own money will get the most value out of Landworth because it's going to give them the data to inform their decision. So whether that's a developer spending money to build, or a lender who's lending their money to someone to build as well, or a buyer, or whatever it might be. Sellers, obviously, if I want to sell my house, I want to know really what it's worth. What it will fetch on the open market is slightly different because ultimately a property is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. But for a seller, it's going to give you an idea of like, this is probably what it's worth. And then typically a seller would add 10%, for example, and then list it at that price with the expectation that they might get offers. They'll get offers with some kind of discount. Of course, the flip side is I think it's worth X. I think it's worth 500 grand. I'll list it at 450 to generate interest, perhaps create a bidding war. This can work. Just different estate agents and people have different techniques and styles, and it also depends on the activity in the local market. If you've got a very unique property, and it's one of a kind in a highly desirable area, you can ask price to be higher. But if it's actually a more competitive market where there's similar properties, maybe you want to start lower to get those things bidded up. So there's a lot of psychology that goes into it. I will say that it's property valuations is very different to my former world life in fintech of sort of stock valuations, where obviously the value is based on expected future values and things like that. There's a lot more complexity in it, but it's a lot of numbers, less psychology. And every single stock, every Apple stock, for the most part, every Apple stock's very kind of same as every other Apple stock. So it's a completely homogeneous asset. Whereas property, everything's different, right? Even within a building, you've got a flat on floor 7 and a flat on floor 8. It'd be identical, but they're on different floors with slightly different views. It will change the value. Now, the view it has depends on the person that's buying it, and whether they're there at the same right time, so on and so forth. There's all these factors that come into it that affect that price that someone's willing to pay.
There's a lot more subjective attributes to it. Yeah, that assigns value to it. Yeah, exactly.
So what we're really determining is and the highest probability that a property will sell at a given price. There is no certainty until it actually goes on the market and it sells and the transaction goes through and the money's been sent. That's when you really know. That's what we base our algorithms on: the sold data price, the sold price paid data sets. But yeah, it's a probability of the price rather than
based on the more tangible data points that are accessible to you, as opposed to the subjective untangible data that I suppose the estate agents or the buyers and the sellers will add on top of that. So would you mentioned that the estate agents aren't necessarily your main primary I can't speak. I've spoken too much today. Primary sort of users, but more developers and buyers and things like that. But who is your main client? Out of that, is there any particular one, or is it quite evenly spread across there, or what does that look like?
So without going into deep numbers, I'd say it's a reasonably good split between the kind of independent property professionals. So that's kind of your developers, people who are flipping houses perhaps, or buy-to-let landlords. So husband and wife teams, sort of that kind of two brothers, for example. So we've got those sort of smaller customers who they usually sit on our starter package, and they might only do 2 or 3 deals a year, perhaps 1, 2, 3 deals a year. So they're doing a lot of assessment, but not that much actually transacting. And then we have a split with the SME businesses. So they're sort of larger organizations, 20, 30, 40, 50 people perhaps, where they typically have a dedicated team, maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 people who are doing this type of analysis. For them, it's slightly different, but they are doing that same job more efficiently, which means they can look at more jobs. And for them, we're also helping them to kind of reject so for the lenders, for example, we've got a decent amount of property lenders who are giving money to people to do these types of projects. What will happen is they'll get a lot of requests for, I want to borrow £1 million for project XYZ, and we're going to make 1.5 million, and I'm going to give you back a load of money in 12 months from now. A lot of people try their luck, right? They fudge the numbers to make it look like a better deal than it is otherwise. So we help those sort of SMEs to reject those bad deals far faster. Don't spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour assessing a deal which just won't stack up from the get-go. Figure that out in a minute or 2 and move on to the next one.
There's a risk management aspect of it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the people you're serving with the product now, did you already know that these were individual sectors, whatever, that you were going to be serving when you first set out, or did you have a very different perception as to who was probably going to be your users, I guess, when you first built the product?
Good question. Yeah. No, I did not know this whatsoever. So a little bit more about me is really, I didn't know much about property before 5 or so years ago. Before I started looking into it, I had a lot of experience in different other sectors, but just never had to interact with property, so I didn't know too much about it. So I started off doing, which I think is good for a startup founder to do, is solve my own problem, which was I wanted to buy. I was a first-time buyer, and I just had no clue. And it just, as far as I could see, everyone was trying to get my money from me, and no no one is giving me reliable information about this stuff. You know,
no one's telling you reliably why it's that much money. It's just it's that much money.
Exactly. You go on viewings with estate agents and everything's a great deal. This property perfect for you, everything. And I was like, this is going down like a broken record. Like when he's trying to sell me stuff, he's not got my best interest at heart. I couldn't trust him from the get-go. So
his commission is what he's interested
in. Exactly. They're trying to sell you stuff. So I just thought to myself, where's the website I go to where I type in the address of the property and it gives me the information I need? I couldn't find one. There were some slightly better tools than Zoopla and Rightmove, things like mouse price and house prices, but it still wasn't the view of the market I wanted. So, because I had the technical chops to figure things out, and so I sort of chopping away, coding away, playing with things, building a beta. And the beta was less of a valuation tool, more of a property sourcing tool. It just helped you find the best deals in the market, and it would assess what's like on the market right now in real time by looking at floor plans, as I said, and things like that. So I originally had set off to sort of solve the problem for the average consumers, and I still very much care deeply about those users. The problem is people don't buy and sell property. Well, they do it on average every sort of 7 or 8 years. So if you can capture one of these users and get them on your platform using it, then great. You know, 3 months, 6 months later, they buy their property and they go off, and you've lost them as a user for a while. This is a very hard way to build a business if you have that type of transient user. So I met lots of people. I have a lot of connections in property regardless, and I talked to people, and I just kind of started feeling things out and pitching to estate agents, pitching to developers, pitching to investors, pitching to sources, pitching to surveyors. There's even government departments that find this stuff very useful, and I get a lot of positive feedback. But you really know when you're solving a problem for someone when they're prepared to pay for it. A lot of people will use tools for free. A lot of people say this is great, amazing, yeah, I definitely buy this. But when you ask them to put their money where their mouth is, they don't. And so that was the beta was free, and we started off with there, and I got a lot of feedback from that, and that's where we created kind of the main like pro version, the version we sell now. But it was when I started asking people to pay £100 a month, for example, was sort of one of our starting price points around that, £99 a month. Who would do that? Who said, yeah, absolutely, no problem? And then who was like, oh, I don't know, can you give me a discount? I have to think about it. They're not your good users, right? And either you need to evolve the product, or you need to, focus down the market that's actually biting your hand off. And so, developers and investors and lenders, we found the best traction there, and they're the types of users who do keep coming back. As I said, they're not doing it every 7 years. They're in the business for a while, and so. Yeah, we retain those types of users. It's
funny because it can also be the people who sort of am and are about it can also be indicative of of a problem that is of offering a free version first, which is it can get people used to it being free. So sometimes that information you get in response to offering it and saying, okay, now you have to pay for it, it may not be an actual good representation of what the rest of the market might say, just those individuals who had free access up until that point, and now they suddenly feel a bit hard done by because you're saying that we want money. That's the only problem. So I suppose you have to extrapolate that out as well, of like, okay, are they actually doing it for that reason, or is it because they don't get enough value from it as these particular type of users? And that's could be quite a difficult thing to reconcile and try and discover, right?
Yeah, well, what we did in our case was the beta stayed free, and we started sending messages out to people saying this is going away on this date,
right?
But we have the new version here. So.
Excuse me. Well, that came out of nowhere.
We basically, it was upgrade to the new version, the pro version, and pay for that. The beta you can use it up until this date, and so it wasn't just like pay for this thing that you've had for free. It was there's a new thing to pay for, which does everything that you were doing and all of that stuff. Yeah, exactly, with something that's higher value that did more. And so not all of our customers came for that journey as well. I will say that, but we did sort of upsell a few of them there and convert them into subscribing customers. To do that. And there are other tips and tricks you can do to help encourage them along, and discounts for 6 months, 12 months, stuff like that.
Yeah, see how you get on, etc., etc. But it's interesting because your journey is, and I recorded another podcast session this morning with a lovely gentleman called Ralph, who owns a national window cleaning service that's built on a marketplace function. It's very impressive, and you'll hopefully see the episode. It will be out before this one. And we had the conversation that quite often comes up around foundership and entrepreneurialism as a whole, which is, focusing on something that you know and that you understand and that you live and you breathe and so on, right? Which in his case, he built a business around window cleaning, because he went into window cleaning, and then he built this massive business around it, and this wonderful idea. And it's interesting, we talked about that, and I've talked about it with many people before, but there's always a but, right? There's always a but. There are exceptions to that. There are people who find something that they've had no real exposure to up until that point that suddenly captures them, and they get hooked by, and they get sucked into, and they get absolutely addicted to solving that problem, even though before that they never really had any exposure or interest in that. And this is you, right? Because this isn't like something that you've been building up to throughout your career. I suppose the aspects of it that do fit that are the technical side, right? The data side, the analytical side, and that's the bit that seems to gel with this. This isn't like you've just woken up one day and said, I'm going to learn how to code and I'm choosing this particular path. This is very specific to your skill set. So I suppose in that sense, it still fits that mold. But it is in an area that, like you said, you experienced this thing as you were doing it, and then you were like, I'm going to go into it. And even now, it's still somewhat far removed from the original concept of helping the buyer. So I find that really interesting. I mean, do you not prescribe to that general idea then, or do you feel like it actually still does apply to you somewhat?
Yeah, no. So a couple points to make. I do agree with you. I think general advice for founders would be, if you have, if there's a domain that you are an expert in, try and solve problems in that domain, because you're the expert. You know things. You've got hopefully years and years of experience in it, and you know the people, and you know what's going on. And if you own that problem, and you can go, I've had this problem for the last 5-10 years. I know how to solve it. That's the making of many good businesses. So I would always encourage to do that. You really want to look for somewhere where you have an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
Look for those areas, because if I wanted to do a startup on, an app for pregnant women to help them with, the 9-month pregnancy journey, I don't think I'm going to do a very good job.
You never know. You might smash it.
You never know. But what is my unfair advantage? Because I've never been pregnant, right? So it's not a good fit for me, unless I was to partner up with a lady who maybe she's had 8 kids and she's like, I always have the same problem, and I know I have an idea about a technical problem, and I would pair up with them to help her solve it if I cared enough about it. That would work. But that would be good advice generally to really own the problem. Don't go and solve a problem in an area you have no experience of, because it's challenging. In my case, you're right. I am a bit of an anomaly in this space, but for exactly the reasons you said. I saw it as, it wasn't a property problem so much as a data problem. And it's not property values that really, like I said, it's not what's changing, it's land values that are changing. And who has accurately mapped out the value of land? I don't think anyone else has, because if you even look at the Her Majesty's Land Registry, HMR, and you look at their statistics, because they publish their own statistics, it's still based around average house prices and how average house prices are going up and down, not land values, which is what's triggering those changes. So everyone's kind of, because that's what people care about. They care about the property price because that's what they're buying and selling, but it's not really what's going on there. And so I very much looked at it as a data problem. Let's go and solve a data problem. That's what got me interested in it at first, and then property was tangential. It was very important to me at the time, and it's, for most people, buying property is the biggest financial decision you will ever make, right? It's the biggest financial asset you'll ever own. And, where is the advice? It's coming from estate agents. This is mind-boggling to me. You find, I don't know, if I'm buying on Amazon now, people have these other websites which will track the prices of different products on a day-by-day basis, so that you go, I'm not going to buy it now. I'm going to set a reminder on it. And in, 18 days time from now, it's going to be at its historical low price. And great, I've saved myself £2.50, right? How much effort have you put in to save yourself £2.50, right? Now, if I said to you, well, this website can help save you 25 grand off your purchase of your price, maybe more. Why do these websites not? Why are there not more of these websites that help people do this? And I think fundamentally it's a difficult problem because of the reasons we described. And so, that's the data side of it. It's a data problem in my mind. It takes a data scientist to address it, as opposed to a property expert to address it, which is typically where people have probably been trying to address it from and not really had an impact.
It reminds me a lot of you see these these big tech billionaires who get involved in a whole range of different interests. You know, like Elon Musk is the typical example for that. When you look at him and you're like, well, you know, what business does he have going into space exploration or going into automotive engineering or, you know, any of these things, you know, robotics and all that kind of thing. And I think, you know, with a lot of these people, they similar to sort of what you've described there. And this isn't to say, I'm not making the comparison between you and Elon Musk, by the way, or I could be.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't mind, but yes, I'm not being there yet.
Depends how you feel about him as well. I know people have got mixed feelings on him, but like, you know, their approach, you know, if you ask, I'm sure if you were to ask him, I'm sure if I heard him talk about this in interviews, that, you know, he's been asked, what gives you the right to go into these different spaces if this isn't your background? You know, people have spent their whole livelihoods in you know, space exploration, rocket engineering, and so on. He's like, well, first of all, he hires the experts. He doesn't claim to be one, but he also does do a lot of reading on it. But he's approaching it from, you know, the ecosystem problem. He sees it as like, well, it's a bigger problem that he's trying to solve, isn't it? He's not just trying to solve the problem of space exploration. He's trying to approach it as a collective problem of, like, you know, humanity's future and this, that, and the other. So it's a smaller version of that, in a sense. Of what I'm trying to say is that, you know, you've seen this from an outside of the box perspective of, like, yeah, this isn't just a problem with property. This is a problem with data, and so approach it from that angle and see what happens. And then obviously, by the sounds of it, you did that and you realized that was the right approach, and you just sort of scaled that from there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just like on the.
It's an odd comparison, I know, but it makes sense in my head.
If you ever thought about it for a second, because I thought about it a while ago, it's like, okay, it's at least I'll just pick Tesla, SpaceX, and the Boring Company, and you're like, they're completely different, and I'm like, not at all. They're very similar. Yeah. The common thread is transportation, right? It's getting from A to B in a cost-effective way and a good, clean for the environment. You know, good for the environment, ideally. Tesla's driving, SpaceX is, you know, rocket ships, and Boring is going through the ground, but they all kind of interplay together. It's all around that.
It's infrastructure. Yeah, that's his concern. It's about infrastructure, because he understands that as a fundamental fundamental part of the way that the world can move forward in a progressive manner. And we need to solve those problems facing infrastructure. I mean, clean energy and all that's part of it to an extent with Tesla and so on, but moreover, it's about, well, how can we make them smart? How can we avoid accidents? How can we decongest the roads? How can we make them safer and faster and all that sort of thing? That's what it comes down to.
And you know, so like what I'd say, coming back to myself as well, both, but you know, the interesting thing about this is so I think the common theme through his stuff, like you said, infrastructure, transportation, logistics. Yeah. With me and for what I've done at Reuters, what I'm doing at Landworth and other things I've done as well in other spaces, it is around data. You know, data scientist, like kind of loosely wear the hat, but that's how I sort of see it. You know, if you saw my LinkedIn profile before, you know, my experience now broad spans fintech, Reuters, PropTech with Landworth, and EdTech as well, education technology, which I do work on. And you know, to the point about staying in your lane, like, I think it's important earlier in your career, but I actually think it is important to get a broad set of experience in different industries, because you know, I have consciously done that. There was a little accident to it as well, but like, I'm happy getting this broad exposure to different industries. Who knows where I'll go in the future, but like, you start to see the similarities between these industries, like data problems, quite pervasive throughout, you know, everything really. Like the bigger the company are, the more you might look at one of these big companies and go, wow, that's a well-run machine. And actually you peel back the layers, you talk to you inside, they're like, oh my God, the pain I have to go through for this, that, and everything else, right? Yeah,
trust me, as a consultant, I know that all too well.
Absolutely. Big companies, big company problems, right? And a lot of that stuff can be data, and they get stuck in these old ways of doing things with the sort of the legacy technology, and they have to keep maintaining it and stuff. Oh, if only we could just rebuild our database, which is not a quick thing at all.
Well, and you can't be disruptive in anything if you're just staying in your lane, right? I mean, what are you going to, you're not going to reinvent anything if you're just continuously making the same thing. So, yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, like I say, you know, I encourage people as they think about their career path and journeys, it's get a variation of experience, go out of your comfort zone. It's good when you're out of your comfort zone, when it hurts, it means you're learning. In most cases,
no, that's great advice.
And that is, you know, you will see things, you will see the cross-pollination of ideas between things. And it's like I said, Elon Musk does this even with some of their AI engineers. They don't say come and work at Tesla or come and work at SpaceX. They say come and I mean, I haven't looked at the job ad, but like come and work with me basically, and you can work on Tesla and SpaceX kind of jobs. And what does he do? He gets the best AI engineers in the world. He poaches them from Google and other places, because they have that opportunity to work across different industries, but kind of solve the same, you know, self-driving car and a self-landing rocket. I'm not an expert, but I'm sure there's some similarities in there.
There's got to be some,
learn, you know.
Yeah, so, some probably significant differences too, but yeah,
I'm sure.
But it probably takes us some level of similar competencies in order to work on those problems. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good to know that you compare yourself to Elon Musk. It's a very humble.
You compared, I'm sure.
Did I bring it up? Oh yeah, it was me, wasn't it? Okay, I'll let you.
Yeah, he's a good role model. I got my Boring Company hat somewhere or other.
Oh really? Oh, okay. Yeah. But no, what you said about, you know, experiencing pain, like that's a really important thing. That you know, I sound like a broken record sometimes in some of these shows because I say the same things over and over again. But one thing I always say is, even to clients and stuff, is, you know, you've got to aim to be shit at something before aiming to be good at something. And you know that there's an important lesson there. Like with my son, for example, he's 8-year-old. Certainly, he actually uses this computer, this monitor I'm staring at. I let him use it every now and then. It's quite a high spec PC, and I let him use it recently to start learning how to use Blender, the 3D rendering tool and animation tool and stuff, because he was interested in it. And I caught him playing with MS Paint, you know, years ago on a crappy old computer he had, and he would somehow manage to open up the 3D section of that, and he was building stuff. And I was like, "How are you doing that?" So when he was like 6. So I gave him. So I said, "All right, here it is. I've, you know, here's a login. Here's Blender. See what you can do. Here's a tutorial on YouTube." He ended up losing his project 6 times. He was getting really frustrated. You know, he was like, you know, tears at one point, but he kept doing it, and he managed to finish it. And he managed to finish this project, and it looks amazing. I was astounded the fact that, you know, 8-year-old could create this thing. And I was like, "How do you feel?" I asked him, like, when he did it, I was like, "How do you feel now about all the times that you lost your work or it broke or whatever?" And he was like, "They're different now. Like, I don't feel as bad now. Like, it was frustrating." I was like, "Right, that's what learning is, buddy." Welcome to the real world. Like, that's what learning is. And now when it happens, he gets frustrated, but he's like, "It's all right, I'm learning." You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very, well, for an 8-year-old to be self-reflective on it as he goes is quite an achievement, I'd say. But usually it's the sort of stuff you
that's one of the reasons why I encouraged him to do it, because I was like, this is a useful thing, especially learning from a YouTube video, like, because, you know, learning how to learn is an extremely difficult thing to learn. If you know what I mean.
Slightly meta. You know? Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, it's the university. It's the whole point of university and school is sometimes it's just learning how to learn. You know, there are exams and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. It can be highly targeted, but it's a lot about proving you can listen and you can do what's needed and you can learn the facts and absorb it. You know, I mean, how much of your how often do you use algebra in your day-to-day life? Yeah, probably not very often, but like, you had to learn it. Like I said, you always often look back on things that you've done and say, "Wow, that was a really horrible time." And, you know, I've spoken to friends about this and coached them through stuff where they're like, "Can't believe I have to do this work." It's like, I remember a friend of mine, he was I won't mention his name as a shout out, but like he you know, 10 years in marketing, senior marketing person, 10+ years, and he joined a new company and he had to go to a student fair and hand out flyers basically. And he was moaning about how he's beyond all this, and I was like, just suck it up and do it, right? And he did, and it was painful for him and it was a learning lesson. But, you know, when we talk about it 6 months later, he's like, "No, it was actually really good to have done that, because it was, you know, got his hands dirty and he learned so much from doing that later he used in his day-to-day." You know, so like, hindsight always gives you a different viewpoint on these things, but it's important to get your hands dirty. If you don't do that in certain businesses, like for me in Landworth, you know, I do cold calling, right? Like, you think 15 years experience, you know, director across the companies, like, why should we be doing cold calling? Well, because I'm learning what the users really want and talking to them, and that's invaluable. That's what actually separates out successful startups from failed startups, is that sometimes the founders just kind of don't want to get their hands dirty, or they hire someone to do it. They pay someone to do a job they should be doing themselves. Yeah,
but you know, I think I mentioned it to you before. I do pro bono work a lot. I do a lot of pro bono sessions with founders, and one of the most common themes I get asked as a commercial advisor, you know, they're often, they're like, "I built this thing and no one's buying it." I ask, you know, very simply, "Well, what are you doing to sell it?" And more often than not, they're like, "Nothing." It's like, well, you know, you're not above, just because you got a title of CEO doesn't mean you're CEO. I'm sorry. What it means is you are the salesperson, you are the marketer, you are the operator, you are the developer, you are all of those things right now. And right now, what you should be focusing on is picking up the phone and making some fucking sales. That's your job.
I think,
you know. And people sometimes feel, well, they need someone like me quite often to just tell them how it is, tell them straight, first of all. But sometimes some people, a very small percentage, feel like they're above that. A bit like your friend, they feel like, I've done my time, I did that, or I didn't get into running my own business to do that. I'll hire other people to do that. And it's like, well, no, man, like your entire life savings has gone into this thing. You've got to sell it now. So sell it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Pull your finger out. Yeah, just do the hard jobs. And it's the thing. It's the hard job. It's the stuff you don't want to do. And people tend to avoid the things that you're avoiding the most is the thing you probably should be doing the most, right? I heard that the other day.
But also, like, a lot of them don't know how to do it, and that's the other thing as well. That often that's the next conversation for me. Is like they're like, okay, well, I had thought about that, and I do realize that now. But where do I even start? Like, what's the process? Like, because there's all this talk, especially about getting feedback from people and picking up on their responses and refining your messaging. And it kind of goes back to that thing I said earlier of like, just do it. Because if you're going to be shit at it, aim to be shit at it, and then you can be good at it later. But in the first instance, the thing that you're not doing is picking up the phone. So in the meantime, just pick up the phone. Like it's like about going to the gym. So what am I going to do when I get to the gym? What am I going to work on? What muscle am I going to focus on? Doesn't matter. Get in the fucking door first. Like,
awesome. Well, yeah. Look, I mean, to the couple of things I'd say, I think it's Y Combinator. I followed their startup school syllabus for a while in 30 days. I think they said aim for at least 5 customer conversations or user conversations per week. That's a kind of a good minimum.
That's I would definitely say that's a minimum, but that's good.
Yeah, it's a minimum, absolutely minimum. But you want to have at least 5 user conversations, whether they're prospective users, current users, or just fresh users, whatever it is. Just try and talk to 5 people and see and pitch them and stuff. That's a kind of good rule of thumb.
If you are enjoying this episode, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments.
But I'll own myself. I'm like, I have a background in product and technology, not marketing. I've done some product marketing, but when I was at Reuters, 50,000 people, there were other people to do those parts of the jobs. I just had to interact with them to make sure that they were doing what they needed to be doing. So when I built Landworth, I came at it from a very product and tech perspective, and marketing was a bit of an unknown to me, right? My friends will still laugh about it. They're like, you need to do marketing. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do advertising. And they're like, no, like marketing. And I was like, advertising? And that was kind of it's going back a few years now, but that was my understanding of it. It was a very newbie, kind of fresh understanding, which I had to grow and learn upon. And there was painful journeys there as I learned more and more about marketing. But yeah, exactly. I try some stuff out. I don't think I aimed for shit. I definitely aimed for good, but I understood that I might be shit at first about it. At least acknowledge it, and you don't feel disheartened when your efforts don't work, right? Because that's the thing. You trial and error. That's the thing. I think we dodge the cliche as like failure is good. There's many years people said failure is good. It's not good, but it's
useful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not good. It's useful.
It's not like
but I mean, it's interesting because even then you say something that I tend to pick up quite a lot when speaking with clients and pro bono clients and stuff like that. Is you mentioned about the importance of your perception of the importance of marketing. People say that word time and time again to me, especially in very early stages of startups. Like, I just don't know how to market my product. I don't know how to market. And my response to that is, well, you shouldn't be marketing your product at all. You should be selling it. And there's a difference. You shouldn't be, because again, marketing makes you think of ads. It makes you think of materials and pay-per-click and all that sort of stuff. No, you don't want to do marketing. You don't want to do advertising. You want to do sales. People need to know. You're not just getting in touch with people to let them know about your product. You're getting in touch with people to ask them to buy it. There's a difference. And that's a lot more proactive and it's a lot more useful. Marketing is about putting stuff into the ether and seeing what happens. Sales is about actions. It's about going out there and just saying, hey, tell me what you think about this. Would you buy it? Would you want it? It's a little bit more substantial in my view.
I'd add to that though. I think marketing is all encompassing. Sales and marketing are joined at the hip. The point.
100%. But I'm talking more just in the earlier stages though. One, I think it should be more skewed towards sales, more so than marketing, in my opinion.
I totally agree. You want to sell something, whether it's an idea. Even that's the thing is, people get caught up there. I don't have anything yet. Doesn't matter. Sell them on the idea you have.
Yes.
If you have the most kick-ass killer idea ever, you will get people to pay you money before you have anything, right? That's the holy grail of startups. Is I've got 1,000 people that have put down money for the thing I've told them I will build. And let's go back to our friend Elon Musk. What's he done with all the the Tesla Model 3 and the Cybertrucks, things like this, it put down a deposit, and he's collected millions and millions and millions of dollars from people for something that doesn't exist yet, or probably, you know, it's in the flight, but like, because yes, he's got the track record and stuff, but that's the holy grail, to get people to pay for something that doesn't exist yet. Kickstarter is a good example of that as well.
I was just thinking about that.
That only certain businesses work in that model, but the notion of selling something that doesn't exist is totally fine. And sell the idea. You can get a bit of a waiting list. You know, if you've got an idea of something and you go, oh, it's going to cost me £1 million to build it, fine. Get 10,000 people putting their email addresses down on some simple landing page that says, I am interested in this. And then you take those 10,000 and you go to an investor with an idea and go, I've got the interest and I've got the plan. You know, I guarantee you're going to get the money, but you've got a damn slight higher chance.
And really importantly, I've got the skill set to make it work, which I think is something that, which to your point about the experience side of things is important.
Possibly the team as well would be would be great in there, but like above all, interest from users. That's the best thing. The thing I think about marketing, though, I'd say now my kind of mental model on it is twofold. It's who is the right customer for your product, and how are you talking to them? That's kind of what it distills down to in two ways, in very, very simplistic. You know, there's the channel you reach them as well as important, but like fundamentally, you asked the question before, you know, property developers, investors, these people who are the best users for us. There's something called an ICP as well, an ideal customer persona. Think about that. Who is your ideal customer? And then as you do that exercise, you'll think about how do I, you know, tell them how great what I've got is in a way that reaches them and talks to them, because you know, everyone suffers from information overload, where everything, you know, this and that. If you've got someone's attention, you've got your ideal customer's attention, you've got about 5 seconds to capture their interest and get them to do something that takes things a step further. So you've got to be pretty damn, you know, concise and clear with your messaging, and that value proposition has got to come out very early on. And too many people get caught up with like buzzword bullshit where I've got this new AI cloud-enabled, super, you know, smart app, and people lost their attention before they've even got to the crux of what it is they're trying to sell.
And you know, it's funny you mention this, because this is exactly what I had a conversation with my co-founder with today about our offering. We announced coming out of stealth recently, I think yesterday, in fact. What day is it today? Yeah, yesterday announced coming out of stealth, and got some great feedback from people, which was to be expected, on the fact that we're not being very specific with the target market we're going for, which we always knew was probably going to be the feedback, and we were always prepared to change that. But it was overwhelmingly useful and abundant, the feedback. And to your point, it's, you know, the messaging is unclear about the product. That was the feedback, basically. What does it actually do? Who is it for? And how does it do it? That kind of thing. And it's because we tried to make the messaging appeal to as many different people as possible. Right? And that was somewhat intentional to see the response. We kind of knew that was going to be the case, because it's kind of common sense, but it was useful to have that hypothesis, you know, tested and proven right. And now we know, okay, we are going to hone in on this particular ICP, and we're going to make the messaging around that. And I literally got off a pro bono call before I jumped onto you, where I was giving the exact same advice to someone else, you know, where like they were saying, we're struggling to get a foothold in pay-per-click, and we're struggling to make an impact with our BDMs and so on. It's like, well, who are they selling to? Everyone. Well, there's your problem. You know, because like you said, you know, that if they go to a landing page and you know, from an ad, the ad isn't specific for them, and then the testimonial isn't specific to their industry or from someone that they recognize in their industry, or the data and the, you know, all that, and the value proposition isn't all relevant to their specific industry. Even just from a terminology point of view, like you can have the exact same information, but just slightly different terminology is relevant to that market. Suddenly it's relatable, and then they can buy into it and they understand it, and there's a certain level of trust there, right? It's like, oh, okay, these people don't just understand what they do, they understand my industry specifically. So I'm going to work with them, not the other guy that claims to work with everyone. It's like they get me. And that's
the thing that comes to mind for me is, it's like, if you try and talk to everyone, you end up talking to no one. Right. And it's not at a level you want. And then like a top tip I'd say to people would be, if you're not sure about this, maybe you've got to start up and you're like, because Landworth's like this as well. It can solve serve multiple different types of users, right? And it was built that way. And the product can do that, but the marketing should not be generic. So like the tip I would say to people, if you're unsure about this, is actually with the rise of AI tools and the simplicity that you can build websites now, simple landing pages, it's very straightforward to just create, say, 3 variations of a particular landing page, the same images, modifications, like you say, of slightly different text, talking to different types of users, and actually hosted on different domains or whatever it might be, and actually push out each of them. Maybe do an ad campaign with £1,000 for each site with slightly different messaging, and just see what clicks.
Yeah,
and
it's A/B testing, right?
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. But you can do it with whole landing pages now, right? Which it's far easier than it was, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And you can just spawn these up and try different things and vary them. And yeah, like I say, it's not throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. Sitting there just thinking that it's all going to work out is not a recipe for success.
Exactly, and we tried that somewhat with our approach yesterday, and sort of building in the months building up to that, of like I suppose there was a certain level of see what sticks, but it was to some degree more like the landing page thing, where it's just like, okay, well, what's going to be the response when I make this announcement in the little pockets of communities that serve these different industries? What's going to be the feedback? And very clearly there was a winner, right? It was like, okay, this is the one that seems to resonate more with, once they get what it is, right? Which is still an overall problem. Once they get what it is, it resonates more. There's a more visceral reaction there. So it's like, okay, right. So and that was always the hypothesis, but it's like, okay, it's been proven now. So now we know, and we've not gone with it of any bias, because we've gone with one blanket approach for everyone and giving the same thing to everyone. It's like, okay, that one is the one that came up. Right, that's what we thought. So now scrap that and let's focus there. You know? So it's another way of doing it.
No, it absolutely works. So the only challenge you got there is there's a tiny bit risk of bias, which is depending on what channels you use to actually popularize, to reach those users who give the feedback on there. Because if you all went through, I don't know, for example, if all your promotion was through TikTok, you might expect it to be a slightly younger demographic that have actually reached your landing page, that might give you different feedback to people that perhaps, if you went through Facebook and there's a marketing campaign there, because they're going to be an old demographic, maybe it's more suitable for them. So you do have to think about the persona, the channel, and the messaging all kind of together. But like my point was, like, if you know your persona and you know the messaging, you can figure out which channel's the right ones to reach them. So that's kind of a secondary consideration. But it does, if you're doing it the other way around, then the channel you're using can impact the conclusions you reach. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, and it's a very good point. I mean, a lot of it was a realization that we made a lot of educated guesses, let's say, that were proven wrong in the last sort of 48 hours, and it's been surprising, but incredibly useful, and a bit of an awakening. But yeah, that's part of the experience. And but you've got to be open to having all of your preconceptions proven wrong. That's the key. Is, don't marry yourself to any idea or opinion, and just come into it with an open mind and be ready to be proven wrong. That's the important thing. So there's certain elements of the commercial strategy which I were adamant about, that I'm now going, no, we're scrapping that, and that's fine. And you've got to be agile in that regard.
But there's I think it's saying that, if I try and get it right, it's the ideal startup founders have a set of strongly held loose beliefs.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
I can't remember where that quote comes from.
I remember either.
It's a very famous quote.
It's a good one. And like, to kind of translate it into some English, it's, you've got to be pretty damn sure of what you're doing, but you've got to be pretty damn open to be challenged on that and to change your mind if someone can give you a reason for it or not to. I will say, the whole thing about assumptions is also really, really important. Especially in the early days, like, you cannot test everything. It's impossible. You have to go on 90% plus assumptions and go, I think if I do this, then people will like it. Or if I build that, that's what they want. Or if I do this type of marketing, I'll get this response. Like, you need to do that. You can, again, being stuck in analysis paralysis for too long. If you're like, well, before I do anything, I'm going to create a focus group. We're going to send out surveys. We're going to talk to industry experts. You can do certain things this way, but like, often it's just better to say, I think this is going to work. I'll try it out. And it's the feedback from that informs does it confirm your assumption, or does it challenge your assumption? Yeah. And
maybe be ready with some alternatives for that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, absolutely right. Because if, and I think that comes with a mixture of experience and common sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, just a bit of experience around UI, for example, going back to that. will lead you to the right decisions in relation to how you lay out your platform, let's say. But also a bit of common sense will inform that too, even if you don't have that experience. So a healthy dose of those two things combined will hopefully put you in the right direction until you can start bringing in that actual data to guide it further. But yeah, there's going to be some educated guesses that you should hopefully be making along the way to get you to point A to point B and so on.
Yeah,
but,
like some similar things. Like what color should everything be? It's like,
right,
pick one and go with it. Like,
yeah, it doesn't matter
too much.
But
people come to you go,
make sure there's a dark mode.
That bright red. Oh yeah, there's a dark mode.
Yeah. Always has to be a dark mode.
Yeah, it's bright red. People might say to you, it's great what you've built here, but the color's kind of crap. You go, all right, fine, I'll change it. But
yeah. But again, there's a bit of common sense there, which is like, yeah. But again, there's a bit of common sense there, which is bright red probably shouldn't be bright red. Of course. Like,
yeah. So well, actually, I do think like names is an interesting one. People get really caught up with names. I see two sides to it. One where people just go, got a name, here you go. And others where I need to do all this sort of investigation, things like that. And there's like, you can get really caught up with that for a long time.
There's nuance in everything, right? There's a gray area of everything. And so like even what we're saying there about, speeds to delivery and all that, there are exceptions to that. Like, there are exceptions to iterating. There are exceptions to this idea of building an MVP at all. Like there are some businesses, there are some clients I'm working with where they're in an industry where an MVP would absolutely destroy the brand of their business. They have to go straight to a V1, and it has to be of a certain quality because they're serving a sector which is, of a certain, they expect a certain standard and things like that. So there's exceptions to all these rules. And names is another one where, it depends where you're selling into. It depends on what it is that your product, does and is. And there are others where none of it matters. Marketing doesn't matter. Like, you don't even need to have a fucking website. Like, you don't need to have any presence beyond just sending an email to someone and saying, this is what we do. And it's because it's such a bespoke enterprise level. So, you know what I mean? So there's gray area everywhere, but, we're talking about the broad strokes.
Yeah.
But name is the one, like, generally speaking, you could flick through a dictionary and just go, that word and flick through the dictionary again, pick that word, combine them, and you've got a name for a business. It doesn't matter.
To be honest, with ChatGPT as well now, you can iterate through that as well. Yeah, if it takes you if you're spending more than a day on it, you're spending too long. I'd say probably, especially these days with the tools available. But yeah, the other thing I'd say on that, just for anyone that's listening, is like, just thinking about this right now, is just make sure you can spell it. Don't pick out like obscurely spelled words and names and things where there's letters missing or different vowels and things like that, because no one will hear it and then they'll go and type it into Google and they just won't find you because it couldn't. I worked with a client. One of my first SaaS clients as an advisor was, I won't say the name of the company because I value that relationship and friendship still. Was a name of a business that, for the life of me, I could not pronounce, no matter how many times I tried. Right. And I thought maybe it's something wrong with me. So I checked with my wife and I checked with friends. And I was like, can any of you pronounce this? And if I asked you to respell it without looking, could you? And I was like, okay, no. So I came back and I said, look, I think you need to change the name of your business. And it was a hard no. It's like, this name means something to me. It has, and I'm like, man, you're never going to be able to market this product. I'm sorry, unless you can unmarry yourself from this word that has meaning to you, it has meaning for no one else other than you. Yeah.
Like, you've got to let that go. And she wouldn't let it go.
That's strongly held loose belief. That's where someone has a strong belief. They go, strongly believe this is the right name for the product. And I could agree they're doing something wrong there, because it's like, you want to have, I believe this is the right name, but I'm open that someone's going to say, well, I've spoken to 10 people and none of them can spell it. You're going to have to rethink that, otherwise you're just kidding yourself, right?
Yeah. It's like it's funny as well we're bringing this up, because it feels timely. I was literally, you know what it's like as a founder. You're thinking about everything constantly and picking it apart. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Whatever. Second guessing yourself constantly. And this idea of the name of our startup came up. Observic is what it's called, right? And some of the feedback, Observic. And some of the feedback that we had recently from some people about the product itself, in some of the tests, in some of the sort of testing we did just based on the idea of it, was there was a concern that it was like spyware, right? It's not at all. It's got nothing to do with that. It's very, very separate from that. But some of the interpretations of some of the tools we had was it might be that, right? And I'm like, is it anything to do with the name? Is the name actually seeding something because it's got observe in it, which is obviously the whole point, but it's meant to be perceived as a more positive thing. So maybe is it that combined with the slightly sort of generic messaging that is creating this joint sort of perfect storm of a misinterpretation of what the platform does. So then it got me along the lines of, do we need to rethink about the name? Do we need to? But then it's been the name for so long. Like, I just think, does it really matter? Actually, I quite like the name. Like, and I keep toing and throwing with it, and I'm not sure how important it is. But
I would say it probably doesn't matter at this stage. I think if you think about changing the name, you'll probably spend an inordinate amount of time doing it for what would be a small amount of value. You know,
to be honest, the length of time I just talked about it is longer than the amount of time I thought about it.
Yeah, fine, exactly. But it will be in the back of your mind for a while.
But it's there, yeah.
I think it's probably not. You know, it's just kind of that's a funnel optimization type thing, where it's like, you know what, 2% of our users get a bad connotations about the name, and like, let's maybe think about rebrand. But you know, if you've got less than 100 paying customers, it's probably the wrong time to think about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just plow on, just keep going for now.
And it's the first time it ever came up, to be honest. And it was only a few people, but it's, you know what it's like. Sometimes all it can take is a few things. And you're like, wait a minute, is there a correlation there between this and this? Yeah. And you start making connections that just don't fucking exist. And like, you know, it's one that just came into my head. But anyway, it's an interesting one. Yeah. But Landworth, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. I like names that just explain the thing as well, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It tells you how much your land's worth. We do stuff from there, but you know, that's absolutely, that was an early decision actually. I was playing with land value as well as the land value, like a lot of our backend stuff. It has that labels there, but like, yeah, it was like, well, how much is land worth? What's your house worth? You know, you can, you know, the whole chain of businesses. You know, at some point the empire, the worth empire, you know, could be art worth, for example, or moon worth, or Mars worth. Perhaps when we get to Mars, you know, you want to like how much your dome on the Mars worth. Oh yeah, we have an app for that. You can imagine, you know, just something that helps you figure out what things are actually worth. It's
I mean, I look forward to a future where we're talking about the value of land on a different planet. Like, that is a future I'm hoping to live to start seeing. That would be so cool. I don't know about you, but I yes, something of an aspiring futurist, and in that regard, like, I would very much to live in a future where we're living on another planet at some point. Or beginning to, at least.
Visiting them. Yeah, I'm still not like living on Mars is still a little bit commitment there, but
maybe living on the moon. That would be a nice starting point to see in my life, and then visiting Mars maybe. But
perhaps, it's, hopefully sooner rather than later, I suppose. I'd be very happy to work with Elon on Marsworth.
Would you have a holiday home on a different planet?
I was thinking about it
because you know that's going to be the first thing, right? For the general public, it's going to be who's the richest enough to buy a holiday home on the moon.
Yeah, that's I imagine it'd be Airbnb at some point. You know, you do a timeshare type thing. I can go there for 1 month in a year or something like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting how the economies work on these other planets when we can't get there that easily.
Well, yet we'll see. But let me ask you about you a bit more, because obviously we focus a lot on Landworth and you know, story to get in there. But like, tell me about you on a more personal level. So, you know, family, like things like that. You know, whereabouts in the UK are you again?
So I'm in Northwest London. So NW11, just near to Hampstead Heath. Nice views of London and stuff. My family here. Everyone is in Northwest London, pretty much. So grew up here. As I said, born and raised in London. Went to school here before I flew the nest for university.
And do you have a family of your own?
No, not yet. No, much to my mum's ire. I guess Landworth is my baby at the time, for the moment. It's
funny, you're the second founder to tell me that today when talking about children. Yeah,
it's it takes probably similar amounts of time and effort and energy, blood, sweat and tears that go into raising a child. It's like growing a startup. But I'm pushing on 40 next year actually, so it's not in my mind. I'd hope for the next few years I will have a biological baby as well as a technical baby. It's yeah, I do like kids. So
it's funny,
I'm sure
people
that
make
would
the
be my
comparison quite a lot between, you know, parenthood and entrepreneurialism, foundership, whatever you want to call it. And like, there are a lot of comparisons, but I suppose one of the key differences for me is the level of I suppose the reward aspect of it is a little different. Like there is obviously an enormous amount of reward in running a business and the success of that, but and you know the small successes that come about, you know, and things like that. But I don't know, there's something very different about the feeling that it emotes, in the same way that failure also is slightly different too. So the journey is the same, but your feelings about them are very different, if that makes sense. Like, so the failures in business, you know, in entrepreneurship can be incredibly soul destroying. Of course, they can, you know, put you in very dark places, just as how the highs can put you in incredibly high places. But for some reason, there's something about parenthood that when you go through the same journey, you're way harder on yourself at the lows, and even to some degree, you know, maybe not as gentle on yourself even in the highs, because you're happy, but you don't really attribute that to your own input as much. I don't know, it's odd, but the emotion is just far more amplified, I think. And I don't know if that's biological, perhaps, like that something's there triggered, because you certainly, at least I've noticed, I've got a lot more emotional since becoming a father. Like, you know, I get brought closer to tears, like looking at an advert like now, like and stuff like. I'm a lot more sensitive, like about things in general than I used to be.
Right,
maybe it's just age as well. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, you know, not having kids of my own, it's hard to escape. But I think it's the major differences. I think the fact that at least with the startup, you can switch off if you need to. You can take a 2-week holiday. Good luck taking a 2-week holiday from your wife, your partner, and kids, you know, without paying for it significantly at somewhere else. Maybe a couple of long weekend, you might be lucky, you know. But
having said that, that's actually probably not a bad thing to do. Like, it might sound a bit heartless, but actually it's probably a good thing to do. Sure. Is take a bit of a break from your partner and have a bit of a break from your kids, and, you know, do all this every now and then. Maybe not for 2 weeks, but, like, you know.
Yeah, long weekend with the lads, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for the mental health. Absolutely. As long as hopefully you have an accommodating partner that understands that as well, and that you would do the same, that she wants a girls' weekend and you look after the little one. Yeah, in terms of reward, you know, the reward function of having a kid versus a startup, I think there are a little different. Yeah, I think from what I hear, you know, at least the first several months, maybe a couple of years, are a shit show, both metaphorically and probably literally in some cases, you know, tsunamis and things. So you gotta clean up a lot of crap. And, you know, after at some point the child becomes like a little person, and then you start to get stuff back from them. You get like that, you know, real feedback, and they talk to you, and you're like, wow, I created this thing, right? So I think there is that kind of inevitable reward function with kids. Startups are a little different, because, I mean, as you know, most startups fail. You hear about the success stories, you don't really hear much about the failures. But what's gone on in those, you know, you think about those failures, what's really happening there? I think in a lot of cases, it's like people haven't reached the reward function yet and actually got something back from the time and effort and energy and money that they put into something, that makes them feel like it's worth carrying on. And so, you know, if you know, like, the best feeling I get still now is a new customer, a new subscriber, something, you know, yesterday, it was a day off for me. It was nice, you know, but like, I had an email at some point in the early evening. It says, we've got a new customer, I just created a new subscription. I'm like, it's great. It's a really good feeling, you know, like there's the fruits of your labor. You're getting that from the effort you put in. And I'm actually not working. I'm sitting down at home, you know, and I'm relaxing it. And that's come from about. But I will say it took a long time and a lot of effort to get to the point where that starts to happen. You know, a lot of things have to eventually go right, mostly through iteration, to reach the point where that's happening. And
what year did you first put together Landworth?
So I believe that the company's house was actually registered in 2018. Was when I first sort of started it. Reason being then was, at that point, it wasn't launching a product, a platform. I was doing consultancy work actually with property companies, because a lot of property companies don't know much about technology. So I saw opportunity to do some sort of side hustling, if you will, with property companies, earn a few extra quid. Reuters as well was undergoing a big transition at that time, where we started to briefly, Thomson Reuters sold the financial division to Blackstone, and then about a year later, they sold that new company called Refinitiv to London Stock Exchange, and so that company is now the data and analytics division of London Stock Exchange. And so there's a lot of stuff happens through those sorts of changes, a lot of redundancies. So I was just kind of like, let's see, keep my options open and things. And so I did some consulting work, property companies around that, and I was funneling money into the business. That was actually became our bootstrapping kind of funds. Was based on the consultancy work I did. That helped us to then put the technology in place to launch something. And like I said, the beta was launched some point after that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head exactly the date of it. And the paid version of Landworth was launched at the beginning of 2021, 2.5 years ago. That's when we launched the first paid version, which was coincidental when I left the corporate world and got going with it properly.
These things take time, man. They take time. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially when you're trying to make ends meet, and bootstrap and keep a roof over your head. And this is the thing that a lot of people forget about. It's like you've got to stretch that timeline out when you're doing that as well. And I speak to a lot of founders who have families and they've got other responsibilities beyond just looking after themselves, and that's a whole other kettle of fish too. It's very difficult. You've just got to lower your expectations somewhat to a degree, but also be even more bloody minded that you're going to make it work. It's just going to be on maybe a slightly more stretched out timeline than you imagined, or what can you do to carve out that time? What can you do to pay for it? What can you do to free up capital? There's no one size fits all there, right?
No, not at all. I mean, I remember actually in the earlier days, before I left the corporate world, I must have been messing around with the beta, and I was just giving to people and things like that. And I thought to myself, coming from a product and technical perspective, I was like, this is nearly done. This be a millionaire any day now, right? Kind of,
right.
Naive thought process. And I remember it was one of these kind of Dragon's Den style startup pitching events. I went to some of these in the early days. I think it was actually at Google's offices in London, and I spoke to someone there who was another startup founder. He said to me, we were just talking about his business and my instincts. He said to me, it takes 5 to 10 years to have an overnight success. And I didn't know what he meant at the time. And I thought to myself, no, but surely I'm close. I'm going to be doing a year or two, pretty close to making a lot of money from this. Little did I know. It really does take time. Just even if you got the product right, the marketing and all the other stuff, there's a hell of a lot involved in that. It's like the other half of it. And here we are 5 years later, actually, now make money and turning a profit and things.
And that's a long time to plan for. And so when you hear, founders say, oh, well, we need funding, otherwise we'll be closed in 6 months. It's like, dude, that's not going to work. You need to find a way to figure that out, to stretch it out for the next 6 years, not 6 months.
I typically advise someone to go for try to aim at least for an 18-month runway. So 18-month runway, depending on your burn rate. And if you haven't got enough money for that, reduce your burn rate. Because if you're fundraising every 6 months, some people will do this. They'll actually every 6 months they need more money. They're doing something wrong there, because it can take 6 months. You will literally be stuck in a perpetual fundraising cycle. If you are a sole founder or two founders, that's far too much time. Perhaps if you have 4 or 5 founders on there, one person dedicated to fundraising, you might be able to pull it off, but I still think you're probably doing something wrong there.
Yes, there's enormous time savings fundraising. It takes an enormous amount.
And if you've got 5 people in there that you can even dedicate one person to it, I hate to think what your burn rate's going to be.
Right. Exactly. It's a catch-22 there. So right. Did you fundraise for Landworth then?
We have not yet fundraised. No.
Okay.
As I said, so the initial sort of startup capital came from consultancy work that I did with the property companies to just inject enough capital in there. My co-founder is also technical, so we actually did computer science together back in Leeds. So we have this benefit of being able to develop in-house, and that's a big expense for many businesses. They will spend hundreds of thousands. It would cost many hundreds of thousands to recreate what we've built. And so, it's time, it's sweat and time, that got into it, as opposed to capital that we would have to pay otherwise. But that does give us that really nice benefit that we can iterate very fast. The product is constantly evolving. Things that you will see, things you won't see, right? and many other companies stuck that, you know, they hire, they outsource and things like that, and they paying people constantly on the books for maintaining the software. That gives us a bit of an unfair advantage, you know, back to so before, that's an unfair advantage. We can code, we can develop, we have product design mentalities, and so the product gets better in that direction.
But it's interesting because typically when looking at sort of the history of Silicon Valley as the prime example of sort of what spawned a lot of, you know, what we see now is kind of the template for the software startup ecosystem, if you will. You know, typically, you know, out of that, at least originally, you know, the vast majority, if not all of the founders, were from a technical background. They were developers that were, you know, and they would be going through incubators and accelerators and so on to supplement their skill set in the more commercial side of things. That was generally how it was. And now you're seeing it, you know, sort of flipped almost, I would say, arguably more in favor of non-technical founders. Coming up with ideas and wanting to build them and looking for investment to build these ideas, and struggling more with the technical side. And it's interesting because there's a pretty good split. There's still plenty of technical founders that I come across too, but generally speaking, they're the ones that seem to have the most struggles, because there's a huge learning curve there. Because not only, you know, even if they do raise the money to invest into building the platform, they've still got to become somewhat familiar with the world of development, with the ability to communicate with a development team, you know, not just because of the potential language barriers, but just because it's a very different language to speak, you know, sometimes literally, you know, depending on what the platform's built on. So there's a huge amount of challenges there, and how to project manage that and how to do it, you know, incredibly complex. And then on top of that, if they also don't have any background in the sort of commercial side of things, that adds another layer of it. But you know, it's interesting how that's changed over the years. Like, do you think that there's obviously there's an advantage to you being able to do it, like you just pointed out, but do you feel like that individuals who aren't technical, who want to go and build a software as a platform, have a sort of unknown advantage there to being sort of somewhat ignorant to it, that like there might be ignorance being blissful in that regard? Or do you see it just purely as like a hindrance potentially? What's your view on it?
There's such thing as a simple answer, is there? No. That's not clear cut. So, and
it's never a simple question with me.
No, of course. This is great. I mean, I'll tell you, an anecdote, which would be like in the early days. You know, I can go back 4 years. Friends would say to me, "Why are you building this yourself? Why don't you just outsource it? You know, take it to India. They'll build this for you really quickly and cheap." And I was like, firstly, it won't be quick or cheap. But like, there are certain things you would outsource and certain things you should not outsource. And stuff like Landworth, in my view, yes, aspects can be, and we do outsource certain aspects of the development work, especially like around the UI and things. But there's some things which you just couldn't outsource, because firstly, I don't quite know what the thing I need to be built is. It's like the act of actually building it tells you what you're trying to build. So you're kind of doing design, UX, product management, coding, QA, kind of all in one. Which
it's very exploratory and you doing it kind of thing, right?
It enables you to move quite fast, right? And the weakness of outsourced development teams, wherever in the world they're based, really is usually, if you don't have a really clear spec on what you want, they're not going to give you what you want, right? This is as tale as old as time, which is, I paid some company 300 grand to build the MVP, and then they built it and they charged me 300 grand, but it wasn't what I wanted. They've screwed up. And I'd say, no, you screwed up. Yeah. Well, no, I told them exactly what I wanted. And well, they didn't understand it clearly. Or you weren't explicit enough about what you wanted. There's too many medium level requirements and not enough ground level requirements. Like that's what takes.
And you probably didn't know what you wanted in actual fact.
Exactly. Yeah. I want something that solves this problem. And what you've done is you've outsourced the business analysis and the product management to an outsourced development shop who are just building. They're just doing paint by numbers. But you haven't built the architecture, like the data architecture, the product architecture properly, so that they're interpreting what you're saying and they're giving you something that isn't what you had in mind. It means you weren't clear enough in the first place. So this is a very common problem, which can be overcome by either doing the work yourself, or at least doing the hard stuff yourself, or having really, really good product managers that will and product owners, and often BAs as well, business analysts, and that.
Or work with a technical consultant to some degree, at least. I mean, that would be money well spent. You know, I've just teamed up with a technical advisor and fractional CTO for some of the stuff that I'm doing, and like that's worth its weight in gold for individuals like that who don't know, because they can have guidance on that project management, review stuff before it's sent across. This is how it's going to be interpreted. This is what you need to drill down on. And it's like that can save you potentially, you know, tens if not hundreds of thousands of pain, you know, in pounds later on down the road and these sort of things. I think that's an important thing to do.
Yeah, I totally agree actually. So like, because exactly as I said, there's a blend of different between BA, product manager, product owner, CTO, technical architect. You need so like having consultancy companies is probably a very effective way to do that, because you can tap into a broad set of skills without needing to pay someone a 40-hour week. You know, you just do bits and pieces of that, and that helps you to determine your MVP specification. But coming to your question though, right? You know, I think it's interesting, and I think it's changing quite rapidly. Quite recently. So I think in the past, if you don't have if you're building a technical company, you're specifically making handbags, but if you're building something technical, you want someone with a technical background on your founding board. And many accelerators and investors would look badly upon you if you don't, right? Because you just to say, well, I'm going to build this. I've had this pain point for years. I don't know anything about technology, but I think it can be built. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get AI to solve this problem for me. Right, how you can do that? We're going to outsource to this development team that I know, and they're going to build it all. There's a gap there of really internal technical ownership. So it is important to have a on your founding board. But I would say the things that are changing recently is AI, is making it easier than ever for someone to build stuff with no technical understanding and expertise. And there, you know, the proliferation of low code or no code tools is just accelerating, really. So I do think what you will find probably, I mean, they already exist. There's a couple of these sort of open source repositories which give you access to tools that will, you say, I want an application, I want an app, an iPhone app that does ABC. And you start that off and it comes back to you with clarification questions. So, for example, a game, we say, I want a snake game. And it goes, okay, what are the rules? You know, what are the controls? And it will prompt you for questions. And once you answer those questions, it might give you more and more questions until it goes, okay, I know everything I need to know now. Thank you for answering your questions. And it starts writing the code, and it will create several different files which build a game for you, right? For example, or an application. This already exists today. You know, I can tell you a few different repos with this stuff, but like that's only going to get better. And that's going to be, I'd say 12 months from now, it won't be difficult for you to talk to an AI, and it will create some, I'm not sure MVP is the right word, but like a demo application for something that you are conceiving of. And
like
so
a prototype type.
Yeah, exactly, a prototype, absolutely. Something you can kind of point and click at and maybe install on your phone. Maybe it doesn't do everything it's supposed to do, but maybe it does just enough that you can then, you know, go back to someone and say, look, this is what I've got to build. This is the prototype, and people are already getting good feedback on this. And that will help you to raise the money to go and get a real development team, or get a technical co-founder on board, pay them money to actually come on board full time.
Do you ever think it will get to the point where it will just build the thing? Like, you know,
it kind of can do that already.
Presumably it can. It will get there. I mean, that's kind of inevitable, right? That one day you'd be able to go into one of these platforms and say, these are the parameters for something like Landworth. Build it, and it comes back to you and then says, thanks, here's your bill for $10,000, and then you can buy it and it's yours, and then it's there. Like, you know, I mean, you probably have to answer a hell of a lot of questions, but in theory, it could be doable, right?
A friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, subscribe for more, and join the conversation in the comments. It really helps us out. Thank you.
I would say yes, eventually. The question is always going to be around what kind of time horizon, you know? So I think 12 months from now, you're not going to have Landworth replicated as such. The difficulty in Landworth, I mean, you know, I could sit here and say, no one's ever going to be able to build an AI that can replicate Landworth. I'd probably be, you know, be fibbing a bit there. It's difficult because it's not just about the front end. It's not just the application. Really, the hard part of Landworth, the thing that would take you a lot of many hours to recreate, would be the processing stuff, like the training of data once a month that comes out. We throw the new data sets at it, and it goes and churns out 24 hours later. Here's the latest file that we then put into the databases that powers the rest of the platform. So like that's pretty complex. Also, the whole back end, all of the kind of syndicated searching it's doing, all the real-time aspect of the analysis, that's not easy to recreate either. The front end side of it, though, pretty easy. And we're using AI to help us enhance aspects of the front end to accelerate our development. Yeah, so like a user management page and things like that, where settings and things like that. It's this stuff. A lot of problems have been fixed already, or these problems have been solved for in other places. So AI is good at saying, here is a page that does this. It's stuff that's very prescriptive. But
so presumably, I suppose to get to a point like that, what you would need is a piece of kit, an AI that had access to the back end of many different types of software, so it could understand what it is you wanted based on the information you gave it, could look at that, be trained on that, and then be able to replicate it. And of course, that isn't the way that software is currently structured, at least not now.
Right.
But I suppose a piece of AI could get to that point if it was initially trained on something like creating Snake. Well, then that same AI model, years down the line, when it's been asked to do more and more demanding things, presumably it will have enough data to be able to draw from to create more and increasingly complex projects, right?
So yeah, it comes to this kind of question, the fundamentals of GPT. It's like, is it capable of real creative thought, or is it limited by what it's seen in the past? Because if it's limited by what it's seen in the past, and you ask it to do something truly innovative, it's going to struggle, right? So if the logic of Landworth is completely new and innovative, revolutionary, the back end stuff and the algorithms, I think it would always struggle to do that if that holds true. But then the flip side of it is, well, once it's seen enough backends, if it's seen enough code and backends of similar things, can it deduce the similarities of it and go, well, I need this I need this backend that does this, and it goes, well, I need a bit of that, a bit of this, and it kind of cooks them together in a way. I do think that's going to become possible. There's going to become more and more ways to go about this.
But then, if it has that element of creativity to some degree, then it could deduce those problems without that data set. It could solve the problem creatively, potentially. It said, I wanted to do this, I don't know how. Let me figure it out and come back to you. Then that's a whole different. But that's when we get onto a very different realm of AI. That's a whole different ballgame, isn't it?
Well, that's got, is that
that'd be the least of our worries.
Intelligence? Is that artificial super intelligence? Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think what will happen is you'll end up with both. I think you'll end up with the AI will create solutions for problems that we didn't realize we really had or needed to be solved, and that will be one aspect. And the other will be where it will be able to do things and similar sort of stitch things together. I think the thing with GPT actually, and I'll just kind of just tying it back to with Landworth. Yes, we do use AI technology and stuff like that, but it's not the type of valuation tool where you say, here's a property address, how much is it worth? And it spits out a number. That's not quite how it works. We have it like it's be too cliche, but it's kind of an AI co-pilot. Like the AI helps you to get to your valuation at the end. It helps you get to a number that you have data that supports it, the comparable evidence for it. It does 95% of the heavy lifting, I'd say that, but there's still the 5% of human kind of interaction there, steering the tool and controlling it to get where you want it to be. And it's highly transparent. It's not a black box like most of the systems are. I think to our conversation about what building apps and things like that, it's going to go in that direction where the AI is going to help you to build the app. It isn't necessarily going to do everything for you. You can pull this up if you want, but it's called GPT Engineer. This is the best one I've seen so far, where they could specify what you want it to build. The AI asks for clarification and then builds it. And this can build simple games and applications and things like that. I think there's even a movie somewhere on it. But yeah, this is one of the sort of the leading ones at the moment.
It's pretty cool.
You can see at the bottom there's a little movie where they say make a snake game. Yeah, so that's where I got.
Oh yeah.
And it's viewable for users here, but I'm sure people that will be interested, they can check this out. And this is it asking for clarification, stuff like that. So it's gonna be. It's like you have a consultant, an engineering team, and an architect sitting next to you, around you, and you go, I want a game, I want an app for this. And they go, okay, what kind of game do you want? And they ask you the questions, and then they go, okay, hold on a second. And they produce, here you go, what do you think of this one? And you test it out. Yeah, no, it's good, but I don't like the color of this, the size of that, change the thing to do that. And then it'll iterate through it. So that kind of AI co-pilot for building apps, I think is where we're going to head towards this, rather than it just sort of you know, it is going to make a lot of stuff a lot easier. I will say that, and it's going to, for people like me and you who are, you know, founders who have some technical understanding, expertise that can do these things. It's going to level the playing field a lot.
Yeah. I mean, because it's interesting because like what we said right at the beginning about how ChatGPT, you know, changed its UI to be more consumer friendly, so that, you know, general individuals could use it and without having to have a degree in large language models. You know, I think that there's still very clearly an area of AI as it relates to engineering or development work that is to. My dog just made a funny noise, which still really can, for the most part, only seem to be, at least in my opinion, from what I can tell as an outsider, be really used by people who understand it, right? That it's not like there's a platform like ChatGPT or Midjourney, where the user interface is friendly enough for a layman to go across and say, help me build this thing. It is still very much a tool to facilitate the jobs of software developers for software developers and so on. At least, like, even just looking at this, you know, on GitHub, like, you know, the average person doesn't know what GitHub is. The average person doesn't know how to get something from GitHub and install it and, you know, to make it work and run it in Python and all that sort of stuff. So there's still a barrier. But I, you know, I can definitely see, like you said, in the next 12 months, that could change in the same way that, you know, Midjourney and ChatGPT has helped content creators, you know, for example, you know, facilitate their work and accelerate it forward. This could, along with a whole other suite of tools, be there for any founder who doesn't have any particular level of, you know, huge level of experience in this to be able to get a foot in the door. And that's a really that's a positive thing, I believe. I don't know. I know people have different opinions on whether or not it's a positive thing or not for the industry, but I think if it helps people get moving forward, that's only a positive in my view.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to what we said before as well about this sort of stuff, it's the UX for ChatGPT is really great, right?
Yeah,
we can agree with that. It's very powerful. Very short learning curve actually to become proficient in using it, but to become an expert, again, as we talk about Landworth, like where these shiny buttons are and things, you can be an expert in ChatGPT. You actually have an edge over everyone else. So, for example, custom instructions were released a little while ago with ChatGPT. Originally, initially for the premium users or the ChatGPT Plus users, now for everybody. And custom instructions allow you to customize the way that it behaves. Right now, most people can use it without this. It doesn't matter. If you know how to use custom instructions, though, you can kind of get it to do some other more sophisticated things, quite powerful things. The same goes for plugins and the code interpreter plugins they have now as well. The code interpreter is like a little sort of junior data scientist that sits alongside you, and you can throw CSV files at it, and it will just find patterns in the data. This is, you know, you would ask a junior data scientist to do this kind of stuff, and now it can do it to probably better than a lot of some things are better than I can do in some ways, and it create graphs and charts and all sorts of things. Very easy to use simplistically, but to be advanced, to really get maximum value out of it, you do need to know what you're doing.
It's put a bit of time into it.
Engineer is a quite highly paid job now. So I think you're going to find with AI, there's going to be, to do basic things, I just want something that looks shiny and that kind of works. It'll do that for you if you don't know what you're doing, or if you're not an expert. But proficient users and advanced users will be able to squeeze out way more value out of it because they know how to talk to it in the right way.
And this is the thing. While I think it's definitely a good thing that we're going to have more accessibility to these kinds of things, and, you know, speed up processes and this, that, and the other, we're certainly going to end up with a situation where we have a lot of shit out there, right? A lot, and we're already seeing that. Like, you know, especially when it comes to content, we're already seeing it with, you know, email, with outreach and sales and in marketing and in advertising. We're already starting to see an enormous amount of homogenized rubbish that's very clearly, you know, being perpetrated by AI, put out into the world. You know, a great example of that was there was a lot of complaints around one of the Marvel series that came out recently. What was it called? Secret Invasion. That's beginning credits used AI. And a lot of people obviously kicked off more about the fact that, you know, you've robbed artists from being able to do the work. I was more thinking, yeah, okay, that's a bit of a shame, right? But from a business perspective, they've saved some money. Like, it makes sense if you've got this thing. It was more just the fact that it looked like AI. That was actually the problem. It was more of a creative decision that I was like, that's boring. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you had actually paid an artist to do it, it would have been more exciting. It would have been probably more interesting. Would have had personality. And this is the risk that you have when something is looking at everything and bringing it all together. It's generalized, And so everything's going to start looking the same or not be that great. And especially if you have software that's being developed potentially in this way, you're going to get a lot of ideas because it's faster to get ideas out. But they're going to be shit.
Yeah,
because suddenly everyone's
lose that specification. There's something a bit special about this thing. I still think that will exist. I mean, that's where humans will play the part in the future. Is we take the generic and we make it specific and sexy.
And then you have the survival of the fittest that kicks in, and the whole ecosystem balances itself out, right? You know, and that's the way it works. I mean, it's just like looking at the investment or funding issues that we see around us right now. You know, how you know, really the barrier for, or, you know, the entry requirements to gaining investment now have really tightened up, and a lot of people are struggling to secure investment, you know, as a whole. I've been on record as saying that I think this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It might feel quite painful for the founders trying to get the funding, but actually what it's doing is it's raising the bar. It's saying you shouldn't be coming to us and asking for money unless, like you pointed out earlier, you can prove you've got traction or interested. You've got those 10,000 people interested, which previously angel investors, you know, pre-seed and seed stages weren't too concerned about. Like, they would overlook that a lot. But now the purse strings have been tightened, and that's the view. It's probably going to go back to the way it was before, unfortunately. But for right now, it's probably not a bad thing.
No, I mean, it's capitalist cycles here. We're going to hit into recession. It's inevitable. You know, how bad or how deep it will be remains to be seen. But like these, you know, the VC investment dries up in these cycles, except unless you're building an AI startup right now, then you probably be all right. You might be okay. But like,
which is ironic, considering what we just said.
No, absolutely. But it's the only market. So, you know, if you kind of, I've got this new cryptocurrency idea. I think money anytime soon.
That's very 2020.
Yeah, exactly. But like, it clears the decks. I think that's it's okay. I think what it does now, what will happen now is companies where the fundamentals are wrong won't survive. You know, where their revenue is below their burn rate. So you know, and we're losing £50,000 a month. Yeah, and we've got 500 grand in the bank, so we've got 10 months ahead of us. Then you might not survive, right? Is the reality. And that's what happens to these when if your fundamentals of your business aren't there yet, if your money coming in is not higher than the money going out, then you can end up with a problem. And historically, you could just keep raising money to help kick the can down the road. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. And you convince people that they're gonna get there. Now you either get there or you might not make it the next step. And so, you know,
and that's a business 101 fundamental. I remember learning that when I studied business. I remember my dad telling me that when I asked him about how he is running his business. Your money should make more money than your business should make more money than it spends. And it's like, it seems like a very obvious thing that seems to be forgotten about. But look, you know, when you start playing,
dilutes it down, because VC allows you to borrow money from the future and say, well, we'll pay this back. It's okay. We're gonna burn money either in development or in marketing or in salaries or whatever it is, because we're gonna make this money in the future. But if that was based on bad assumptions, which it often will be, that hasn't come to pass yet, then you haven't won the customers you thought, you haven't retained those, then you will end up unstuck. You know, it makes me quite optimistic about Landworth's futures, because our money, you know, business fundamentals are good. We haven't borrowed money, and the money coming in is more than money going out. So I'm not worried about the recession. If anything, it's going to help us, because some other companies that might provide similar-esque services might not survive, and then, you know, come to us. We'll still be around, so we're not going anywhere. We have no time limit.
That's why the operational foundations and economic foundations of a business is so important. You should be, you know, to be able to weather any kind of storm that's coming up. But and the thing is, and you try and question any of these things about the way that the system is structured, and you're just simply usually told, like, oh, well, you know, it's complicated economic stuff, you wouldn't understand. It's like, well, no, it seems to be like common sense to me.
The fundamentals are basic. You know, as I say, too many people I see will gauge a startup success on how much money you've raised, how many staff you have, right, or how many users you have, which can work in a B2C environment when you have another monetization. But broadly, money you've raised if you've raised £1 million, that's an indication you've convinced someone that you might make money. Not success. Hiring staff is also not an indication of success. That's just like, well, I have the liquidity available to hire staff. It can relate to it, but you can often have a whole load of staff, and what that just means is I've got lots of expenses and I don't actually have the money coming in yet. These are not measures of success. The measure of success is people paying you money, right? That's the only true
profit.
Yeah.
More specifically, profit. What was the profit at the end of last year?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, that's the metric.
Is it positive? Yeah.
And it's like, I remember learning that in fucking school. Like, when did we forget that was a really, important metric? Like, I literally remember my dad showing me when I was a kid. Like we were talking about, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it came up for whatever reason. It's like, generally, if you're going to sell something, you want it to be, I think at the time he said, and I don't know if this still holds true, this was like in commerce at the time, you want to sell it for 5 times the amount it cost you to buy it, right? Because if there's one that you need to give back for the amount you paid for it, another for the amount of pick and pack it, another for the amount of and then 2 for you. Right, and that was like the rule that he explained to me. Like, this is when I was like 9.
It's a good rule of thumb. I think it's more complex than that now.
Yeah, it is. But he was explaining to me as a kid. Right?
Yeah, it's simple. Yeah, no, absolutely. But because you have cost-based pricing, you have value-based pricing.
Of course. Yeah. But he was just saying, like, if I buy this thing from them and I sell it to them, then we need to sell it to them. How do you price it? Well, it's general rule of thumb: 5 times, 6 times.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking about that for years, and it's just come back more. Oh shit! Sorry, my seat keeps going down. Coming more into my mind recently of just like, let's simplify this shit sometimes,
Yeah,
but yeah, you're right.
If you watch Silicon Valley, which it's almost must-have watching for anyone who's building a tech business. I think fundamentals there, and there was
the comedy.
Yes, the comedy.
Yeah. I haven't seen that for. Is that still on?
No. It finished a long while ago.
Oh, right, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Relevant now, even more so with AI, with compression technology and stuff like that. But there was someone who had a business of selling pizzas, and they were like, their own pizzas. But what they were really doing was buying Domino's pizza and then just reboxing it and selling it on. And they were selling it for cheaper than the Domino's were in the first place. And they were like, had some ideas about how they're going to make money until he went and thought, I ordered 10,000 pizzas and completely busted the company because, it's just like they had fundamentals really badly wrong. And it was this VC injection of money. When we get 100,000 users, we're going to do something with it.
I need to revisit that show because I remember really finding it was hitting home in so many places. Like, when I watched it,
like time as well.
Yeah. Apart from that, it did have a comedian in it that got cancelled.
Oh yes, he went to jail, didn't he?
Did he go to actual jail?
I believe. I won't say that with absolute certainty because
what was his name? TJ something.
Yes, it's TJ Miller.
TJ Miller. Which is a shame because I thought it was quite funny. But
he was good. But I don't know, he did something wrong. We ended that way.
Yeah, did some naughty stuff.
Yeah, no, it was just the thought. We just touched on it briefly, but I think it's worth just revisiting for a second, which is like about AI and the job market and unemployment. I think it's a really interesting one. I don't have any answers for you on that one, unfortunately, but like I do see this problem. We're talking about GPT engineer, and I'm like, what I'm starting to see is these AI tools today can do the job of a junior data scientist or a junior coder or a junior graphic designer. What's going to be, it's really interesting to say, like if I was a junior developer, let's say I was a coder, I'm fresh out of university, I've got my computer science degree and I want to get into JavaScript, right? I would take a job as a junior developer in a company, get a year or 2 experience, maybe work my way up to sort of regular software developer, a couple more years, senior software developer, and so on and so forth. And there's a kind of a well-established career path there. If AI is taking the jobs of the junior developers, I start to ask the question like, well, how is a university graduate, what's their first job? Because they haven't got the experience to jump into a software developer. How are they gonna take that leapfrog? And it's going to become hard, I think. And it's not just it's not just software developers, it's data scientists, designers, graphic designers, even to your point, the intro sequence at Secret Invasion. Probably a couple of interns, students, graduates haven't got a job because they use AI to do some of that stuff. And I'm like, what impact's that going to have on the long term?
Probably a full team of people, But I vaguely remember having a similar conversation with someone recently, and I think that the sort of place I landed on with this in my sort of thinking experiment on it, which I've done recently, was this idea that perhaps the education needs to prolong in order to cover that stage. So the experience that would have been gained from going into a job at that point that then leads to the next role and the next role and so on, the education needs to fill that gap. So it needs to find a way to bring in that practical experience. So instead of going into the junior role, they go into that one above. straight out of university or whatever it might be. That's the only logical solution. The only problem with that solution, obviously, is that, well, as AI develops and it goes further and further into taking more and more senior roles, what happens? You can't just, make 7-year, 10-year, 12-year degrees in computer sciences then. Like, it's not practical to keep doing that. Otherwise, that's no longer, at some point you've got to agree that this job is becoming obsolete and it's being replaced. But I mean, I don't think there is a simple solution there. And you're right, it's not just in that one area too. There's so many areas in which
across everything, almost everything right now. Yeah, I think.
But it also just makes things more competitive too. It does mean that people, in the same way that right now you're more likely to give a job to someone who has shown that they've been working on their own projects and maybe building their own stuff and built up their own portfolio. I mean, that's just going to be, if anything, that's going to be exacerbated, and it's just going to be even more prevalent and important in being able to secure a job. There's nothing wrong with, doing everything you can to continually build your own skill set beyond what you've learned at school, and refining your tools and, and all that sort of stuff. And it's just adding to that, in my view. You're no longer just competing against other candidates for a job. You're now competing against AI.
Basically, the jobs will differ. I'm not sure 12-year degree programs is going to work. In my view, I think it's almost like bringing in I've always said for a long time, experience trumps education, right? And some people have, I went to the University of Life. I'm sure you probably know people as well. They're the University of Life. They dropped out of school, GCSEs, or whatever, and they can be some of the smartest people. Sometimes really successful, very, very rich and powerful people who did not get a formal education because they just went straight in with experience and they learned from the world. And it's the hard way. It's the painful way to do it. But back to what we said before, it hurts. It's probably good. I think we're going to see more and more of that. I think universities do need to evolve, and they need to start experience, like industry experience with education as well, and it becomes part of the course.
And these more vocational sort of aspects of what they do.
So software development, computer science isn't just 3 years of sitting in classrooms. It's maybe by the second, third year, you're actually going and doing work with companies to help them out in certain ways. And, it's almost pro bono development work because you're gaining the experience from it. But I think what will also start to happen is so I think university courses need to evolve anyway, and they really need to also think very carefully about it. So, working with some, like, it's what's going to happen to education where you can get a computer science degree online for free via YouTube. You learn the same stuff. Yes, you're not sitting in the classroom with other kids and learning and stuff like that. And there's a lot of universities, not just about the education, it's the experience and learning to be a person in the real world. That's hard to replicate online. But
I've done the Open University experience twice, and it's interesting because the first time I did it was very different from the second. The first time I did it was years ago, like 10 years ago now, and it was very disconnected. I studied sociology, and it was very disconnected from from anyone. You didn't really feel part of a class. Like, they had forums and stuff, but it was very odd. And the more recent one that I did, which was my business management degree, a few years back. Because I actually did follow that route of education like you. I flunked out of school. I didn't do very well. I was kicked out of school. I wasn't particularly well behaved. I managed to do only a couple of GCSEs at school, and then I came back to education later in my life, and I retook my GCSEs because I decided I wanted to do it for me, to show that I could do it, prove to myself. And I passed them all with flying colours. I worked hard on it, and I went back to academia, and in fact was pretty much this is the first time in my adult life since leaving school that I haven't been also studying something on the side. So it's only the last couple of years, in fact, since doing the business management degree. And going back to that Open University experience, completely different. Suddenly they're really leveraging technology to make you feel more integrated. They're doing occasional in-person lectures at certain locations around the country that you can go and visit. Like, they recognize the importance of that community and learning with your peers and the vocational stuff too, and all of that is very important. But it's still going to be vastly different from the experience you could get actually attending every single day in person, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of the university experiences. Going to be hard to bottle it up, but if you're talking 1% of the cost, it's just more accessible to people. I'll just just on your story, I'll share one more thing about my own personal life story, which is not appearing on my LinkedIn profile, which is actually before I went to Leeds and studied computer science. I actually went to Manchester University to study physics. I lasted a year and a half doing that before I dropped out and decided it just wasn't for me. It was it wasn't what I thought. Studying physics was not what I thought it would be. And interestingly, I was given a decision by my parents. They said, okay, you know, they've given me a bit of pocket money there and helped me out towards some things, but they basically said, look, what do you want to do? You know, okay, you don't want to do that, fine. Do you want to join the real world, or do you want to go back to university and do something else? Which I hadn't thought about, but they caveated it and said, look, if you're going to go back to university, you're doing it on your own. We aren't helping you out. There's no more beer money or whatever, you know, whatever you were spending your money on. If you're going back to university, you pay yourself. It's your way, because we're not sponsoring, you know, beer money and things. And it forced me to say, no, I'm going to do this for myself and pay for it myself. I did still have fun, but it meant actually, as I was at Leeds University, at one point, I think I was working 3 jobs in parallel with my studies, because I needed money to live and enjoy. You know, I owned it, and I owned the degree. I wasn't just there to sort my parents out. It was my decision. I did say to my mum, you're not allowed to nag at me if you're not going to give me any pocket money. No more nagging me to do my coursework. But you know, I did it, and I found the ways to do it. And so yeah, it's the you know, I guess it's like the story that you would read about what people do is rarely ever there's always the reality of the hiccups along the road and the paths trodden. But you know, I will say as well, just that year and a half, going back to the point, that year and a half in Manchester, I learned how university works a little more. So I took a lot to Leeds with me, and I kind of understood the systems there. It meant just less to learn, less to understand what needed to be done. And
presumably you learned a bit about your own shortcomings in the way that you interact with the university experience too, right? In the way that you best respond to certain things, and you could probably put some things in place to ensure you were getting even more out of it the third time round. Because that's something that I certainly was reflective on when thinking about my school experience. And then, you know, as an adult learner, I was able to go, okay, I know that these things don't resonate with me as the way I learn, and I can ensure to put myself in the best possible situation to learn as much as possible when I'm doing it out of my own volition. Like, you know, and it's funny because a lot of people have the perception, because of the way I speak, because I can speak rather well sometimes if I choose to, and because I'm from Oxford, right? They assume, Oxford University, right? They assume that I'm university educated from Oxford, you know, with honours, all that sort of shit. And it's like, no, I was a school dropout. I, you know, went to college. I tried out a whole load of different things. I tried music. I tried art. You know, I tried all these different things, and then sociology, and I was interested in people, and then business, and like this. It's never a straight line, man. Like, you know. No,
it never is. And then, you know, like, it's the people that some people that they're in their jobs, they hate their work and they're bored and this and that. What have you tried?
Yeah.
Much. Right, you've been doing this since university, and you haven't tried much. Right. Well, then, you know, maybe it is time to jump into the deep end. You know, I have other friends that have done 101 different jobs. You know, recruitment,
bar work
and bar work. Yeah,
bar work's great work. I worked in bars for years. I worked in restaurants for years. Great work to get out your shell, to meet people, to learn how to be a good communicator, to deal with difficult situations, conflict resolution. So much. I think it should be law.
I've worked in a bar serving people there. It wasn't quite for me. It wasn't my favorite. I've done newspaper rounds. I've done Sainsbury's and shop assistant. You know, and every job I learned. I'm not sure how much I learned from newspaper rounds, to be honest, other than I like working in newspaper rounds, going door to door. But
how to ride a bike. That's
exactly. Yeah, but like, you know, you do it and you experience and you figure out what you do like and what you don't like. I think the worst thing is to not know. You know, that's one of the things I don't know if we're doing for time here, but like, it's something that someone said to me early on when I was thinking about Landworth. I was thinking about what to do it, and it's cliched almost at this point, but there's so much truth to it. It's like, it's better to have tried and failed than to never have tried at all.
Yeah.
You know, and to wonder, what if I could have done that? What if I should have tried this?
Often things are cliched because they're true. Like, that's why they're repeated so often. Yeah, you know. So, but yeah, you're right. You just pointed out the time. I completely lost track of time. We are going to have to wrap up. But what I do like to tend to do sort of towards the end, if you're okay to indulge me for a few more minutes, is just to ask. And look, there's been plenty of this already throughout the conversation, but just to acknowledge the fact that we are recording it, because quite often I forget and we're just talking. But to actually go back to that, like I did at the beginning, any tips for aspiring founders, entrepreneurs, things that you have learned along the way that you would like to leave as your parting message to those listening or watching that could hold some value potentially, or not. If you don't have anything and you feel like you've already expressed it, that's fine too. But perhaps some things that you could share, some little nuggets of wisdom. Wisdom.
Yeah, certainly there've been a few bits and pieces interspersed through our conversation. What have I not mentioned? I think one of, what I can do is look back and go, where did I screw up? Like, what did I do wrong? Or where were my assumptions fundamentally flawed? As I say, I come from a product tech background, so that obviously skews my perspective on it that direction versus someone who maybe comes at this from a marketing background or an entrepreneurial background or a VC, and they would do things in a slightly different way. But one of the probably worst assumptions I would have made, which was born from naivety and from hearing things and whatnot. It's an old saying. It's like, if you build it, they will come. Right?
Yeah. I literally said this to someone today about that being a very big misconception.
Big mistake. One I made. I thought, if I build the best product, then people will come to it because they'll talk about it, they'll share it, things like that. It can be true again, we've talked about it. The one example which contradicts this is ChatGPT, where if you build it, they will come, where they did it. And the reasons for that is because it's so good. It's so powerful what it does. It's so easy to use. And it has this inherent viral quality to it.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. If you build something viral, they will come.
But it's interesting what Sam Altman said. He goes, obviously he ran Y Combinator. He goes, for years and years and years, he told people the advice that said, you've got to build or viral sharing functionality into your product. Don't release it until it has those kind of capabilities. Obviously, ChatGPT did not have that at first. Now it does have some simple bits and pieces. That he said something like, I'm now questioning every piece of advice I ever gave startup founders because I've just completely contradicted all of them myself, right? So, makes you wonder, but that is the exception. Do not think you will build something like ChatGPT unless you have billions and billions and billions and billions in the back, like Sam, right? And his team. Assume that they won't come if you build it, right? It could be the best thing since sliced bread. Assume they won't come, and make sure you put an equal amount of time and thought into how you're going to get it in front of people. And who are you going to get it in front of, and what you're going to say to them when you are in front of them. Back to what we said before about the personas and the messages. And I think, I've thought a lot about this. It's like, why was I wrong? And I think I was probably going on old beliefs, because I think 40, 50 years ago, if you brought a new product out, a new bread slicing machine, you know what? Maybe they will come if you build it, because there's just not that much other stuff coming out. But the rate of innovation that's happening now and the rate of new stuff coming out and being put in front of people is like never before in history, and it's only going to get faster. And so the noise that people hear, your perfect customer will hear 5 or 10 pictures for different products, probably dozens and dozens and dozens across any given day, and ads and things like that. That people's bullshit filters have been turned up to high, right? And unless you are very, very eloquent and clear about what it is you've got and what it's going to do for them and how it's going to make their lives better, you will fall foul of that bullshit filter, and your perfect users will ignore you because you're not talking to them in the right way. Comes back to what I said before about iterating stuff like that. So just, as I say, you can have the best idea and the best product. Don't spend 95% of your time thinking about the product and the features and the buttons and the color of this and the name of your company and whatever else. Think about how you're going to get it in front of people, because it's much harder than it used to be, and building it alone will not bring an audience. I wish I thought about that earlier. I'd come to that realization earlier than I had, because it would have affected the way and the order in which I've done things. Maybe not what we've done, but the order in which we've done them in. And maybe we'll have a few more users than we have now.
Or maybe it would have been 3-4 years as opposed to 5 years or something like that. Who knows? It could have affected that timeline as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I will say that when you listen to other founders talk about their journey, very successful people, they'll basically go, here are all the lessons that you should follow, and then they go, we've made all of these mistakes and that's how we know it. So expect you're still going to make a lot of these mistakes. if you have some awareness, perhaps you don't spend 6 months making a mistake. Perhaps you
Right.
start making a mistake, and after a month, you realize what you're doing, and then you
Right.
course correct from there.
And that's the key, I think. And that's the kind of key as to why I like asking for this advice at the end of these episodes, is because I know for a fact that a lot of people out there are still going to be doing what they're doing. And they're still going, well, this is what I decided to do, and this isn't going to change my mind. I'm still sure this is the right thing to do.
Sure.
But hopefully this conversation resonates in their head when they make that mistake. They go, shit, I've done that exact thing that Paul and Greg talked about not to do. So I need to change on that quickly, as opposed to never hearing it and never thinking about it, which is they will double down on that mistake. And I think that's the problem. You have to make a lot of mistakes for yourself in order to understand the importance of them, hearing them from other people. It's just like your parents telling you, what you shouldn't do in life, right? You're still going to go out there and do the exact fucking thing they told you not to do. Because you need to learn for yourself. And so, that's part of it.
Mistakes. You got to make
exactly.
Mistakes.
But if it can allow you to navigate away from those mistakes and quicker, then that's only a good thing. And to know that even some of the most successful people in the world have made these mistakes and sometimes continue to make the same mistakes. Sometimes in a different setting, is somewhat reassuring, I think.
Yeah, and you want to be just the right amount of stubborn. Like I said,
yes,
strongly held set of loose beliefs.
Yes,
hold on to it, but be open to challenging it and represent it. Just make sure you talk with people that can bring a sort of unemotional viewpoint to you, because people tend to react better to that. If someone gets upset with their beliefs, you're not going to end up very well. But if they can just like, look, this is why I think, and they're willing to sit with you and explain why they think what they are thinking, you can integrate your ideas together and end up with a.
Oh, you basically just described what I do for a living. Pretty much. Yeah.
Exactly. But exactly that.
The no bullshit approach. That's what I call it. Yeah.
Radical candor, I think I've heard as well.
Radical candor. I like that. That I should call it that. That sounds a lot more Oxfordian than the way I describe it. That suits my brand better, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Radical candor is important. Just like I said, but if some people are offended by this, some people, the truth hurts, right? But it can.
You should look at my reviews, man, on Trustpilot. They're all 5-star apart from one, and the review is it reads like a 5-star review, but it's effectively because it hurt their feelings slightly. Yeah, and that's fair, and I can't disagree with that. It's like, I did have to rip off the Band-Aid with you because there were some things wrong with your thinking. So I'm sorry, I have to point that out. That's what you asked me to do, right?
That's the thing. If it hurts,
it was my radical candor.
That's the thing. You learn the most through pain, right? So if the truth hurts, then you're probably hearing the truth because you don't want to hear it, the cold hard truth. And but if you hear it and you understand it and you can take something from it, you will learn. You'll become better. And you'll grow from there, and put out a better product, put out a better, company. So
we all need a bit of radical candor in our lives. I think I'm going to rebrand, and that's going to be my new. I'm going to steal that. That's amazing.
You're welcome. I stole it. I didn't steal it. I borrowed it from someone else. So
Oh, that's fine.
Ideas can be shared. Yeah, it's definitely.
We're basically AI now. Then we're just stealing.
From it's same ideas. Yeah, I mean, the history of the world is regurgitated.
Exactly.
No problem with that. Yeah, there's a whole thing of radical candor. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'll appreciate it. Yeah. Well, cool. Listen, man, it's been really great speaking to you again. And I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I have. It's been really great learning more about you and what you're doing at Landworth and everything. And it's super exciting too. And some of my guests often tell me that this is quite an interesting exercise because it allows them to somewhat appreciate, by verbalizing what the journey's been, to actually appreciate that journey. And I hope that's been the experience for you to sort of actually have a bit of perspective on what you've achieved over the last 5 years. And it's because hearing it is very super impressive and super interesting. And hopefully you come away from this feeling the same way, because I think you should.
It has been very interesting to reflect on the journey a little bit. Yeah, you're right. It's important to stop and smell the roses every so often.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thank you for the time of that. To anyone that's watching as well, that's made it this far, anyone that wants to check out Landworth, if you do go to www.landworth.org, then you can check out our landing page. Greg showed it before. If they want to sign up, they can use the invitation code founders.unplugged, and from there you can create an account.
Amazing.
Without needing to request one first. So
brilliant. Send that over to me, that info in a LinkedIn message, and I'll make sure that's included in the link in the description of the audio and video. I always put the website and link to the founders of my guests that I have on LinkedIn in the description, but I'll include that code and everything in there too. So yeah, awesome.
Will do. Yeah.
All right, man.
Good luck with the rest of the series recording it all. Maybe we'll come back again next season.
Yeah, definitely. We're probably, I think I might now just continue just season 2 forever. I think that might be the thing. I'm not sure if I can be bothered with seasons anymore, but yeah, definitely. I'm going to, more than happy to have you on again in the near future. And and obviously we'll stay in touch and hopefully meet in person one day soon. But enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week. And I'll catch up with you soon, hopefully.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Cheers. Take care. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching and/or listening. Please like, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments below.